Hey, everybody, I'm Jesse,
I'm Brandon.
and this is Boring Conversation.
Welcome to Boring Conversation, a Malifaux podcast.
And welcome back to Boring Conversation, everybody. We are trying something a little bit different today. I've actually been talking about trying to do more video content, and I hadn't really decided on a format. I'm going to start this episode by actually doing something that's going to be sort of a kind of a vergence of both audio and video content. I have Brandon from the Danger Planet on the show today.
Oh, hey, what's going on, everybody?
Hey, what's up? So what we're going to be doing is I put together essentially a spreadsheet for the episode and some additional resources like the Malifaux Crew Builder app, which you can see in hopefully the recording right now. And what we're going to be doing is, Brandon and I decided that we're going to be going to the Nova Open this year, aren't we?
Oh, we are.
Oh, we
It's
are.
going to be great. We're going to
Yes.
take a train down. We're going to hang out. We're going to play some foe.
Yes, a whole heck of a lot of foe. So, because we're going to be traveling, and because I think I've mentioned this in a few other places too, this is actually going to be the first event that I will have traveled for to compete in, or play in rather, as a competitor, as opposed to actually running an event as a TO. I know Brandon's done a good bit of traveling and brought his, a certain selection of his models anyway to events in the past. This is not something that I have ever really had to do since like second edition when I played in the Total Foe League or TFL finals for the last couple of years of M2E. So it's been quite a while since I've had to think about what the heck I'm going to pack with me and how do I prioritize models when there's space limitations to take into account. And then
Yeah.
also, we just have to try and figure out what the heck we're going to bring, determine what our objectives for the event are. If we're going to go for things like Iron Scorpius, or if we're going to be shooting for podium, or maybe both. So
Ideally, both, right?
ideally both.
You
We'll
only get
get
Iron
there.
Scorpius if you podium and do the Scorpius thing.
Yes, hey, it happened at Captain Con. It could happen this time too. I myself am expecting a solidly middle of the pack finish because I know myself and I can talk a big talk, but when it comes to actually getting to a tournament table and not making boneheaded decisions, we'll just say it's not really my strong suit. So we'll see how things go. How about you, Brandon? What are your objectives for the event?
Well, I always say that I want a Scorpius. I think that's as some of you may have known. I think as of Captain Con this earlier in the year, I was on Arcanist as my main faction. I think I played almost exclusively Karis 2 at Captain Con, all like 9 rounds, plus or minus a Damien that I threw at Defective Dice. But uh, but after that event, I sort of took a long hard look in the mirror and decided that Arcanist isn't where I want to be. And so since then, I've been playing Resurrectionists. I've amassed a crew of crews for Resurrectionists, but I actually have reps on probably about 2 to 3. So although the Scorpius is a thing that I am considering, I'm now trying to with less than a month to prepare. Arguably like 2 weeks to prepare, really, right? Because we leave like it's the 30th. That's the first day.
Yeah.
That's like 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
I just got back from Gen Con and have not yet gone to bed. I
Yeah.
don't know what's happening. But I'm going to try and Scorpius, I guess. That's the answer. Assuming that I can get the 2.5 crews that I need painted, because I don't know if you, and most people have seen this. I think Nova has a painting requirement. It says it in the document. So
Yeah, it
that's
does.
certainly a thing. The
That was
fallback,
a
I have a fallback plan, but
that's good.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was a bit of a surprise for me. I do not currently have enough crews painted to Scorpius. However, I did conveniently just purchase a Army Painter speed paint mega bundle set, and I'm gonna try my hand at some slap chop. So after we're done recording today, I'm actually going to be going through my models using this handy dandy checklist that I've put together for myself to see how many of them I need to actually get painted before the event if I'm going to take them with me. So yeah, that's my plan.
Makes sense. I think that oh boy, it's crunch time.
Yeah, crunch time. Yeah, it's like you said, like 2 weeks, no big deal, right? I can get it done. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think we actually get on the train exactly 17 days from now.
Something like that. Yeah.
I think we leave on the 29th. Yeah,
yep.
That sounds right. Neato
indeed.
Neato.
Yeah, I know that we're planning on bringing some, bags with maybe some games to play, card games, small format board games on the train. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that there's a pretty good chance I'm going to be taking some models to paint while we're on that train, because it's about 6 hours spent that I could work on that. So.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, I think that that's totally viable. I don't know how that would work or if it would work well, but we do have a table on the way down. I know that. So
I got dropper bottles, I got a little pallet, and we have a table, so we'll give it a shot.
Oh boy.
We'll see how things go.
Boy.
So that said, one thing I'm going to make mention to anybody who's viewing this is officially the first time that I have tried capturing this type of video along with audio at the same time. I know I've posted some recorded games, but I really haven't dug into using any recording software in any amount of detail, such as OBS, which is what I'm using right now. That said, I have done no video editing in the past. I have no idea what I'm doing with it, to the point that I don't even know what I would use to sync up an audio and a video track. So basically what I'm tasking Brandon with today, and myself, is that we're just not allowed to make any mistakes this whole recording, so I don't have to do any edits. Sound good?
Yeah, totally.
Totally gonna happen.
Huge fan.
Yeah, totally gonna happen. I'm sure there won't be any little kids that come in here and talk to me, or dogs that go bonkers when anybody comes in the house, or me just losing track of what I'm talking about. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So before we actually get into the meat of the episode, I know we started recording on extremely short notice. We'd been talking about this yesterday, and then within about 30 minutes of me saying I was free, Brandon was like, yeah, I'm free too, and now we're recording. So I do have a drink. Do you have a drink, Brandon?
I do. It's not what I wanted. I thought I had prepared better than this, but I just don't see it near me. So
yes, this is not what I wanted either, but that's okay. At least we're on even footing here. So I'll just go ahead with mine. I am drinking a vitamin water Focus kiwi strawberry flavor because I've had a headache all day, and I am not drinking beer right now.
Yeah. That's
Brandon, how about you?
That's what gets me a lot with the beer. I am drinking a Polar lime seltzer. Polar is a small New England company that makes seltzer and various seasonal flavors, which I strongly recommend. Their Pink Lady Apple is one of my favorites.
Yes, we actually have my kids are big bubbly water fans, as am I. To the point that we don't even bother keeping it in the fridge most of the time. It's just sitting out on the counter in cases because we're savages. But we do happen to have a case of the lime and a case of the Pink Lady Apple and Lemon on the counter right now. How about that?
Yep. It's the best. It's so good. Can't say anything about it.
And for anybody who likes local soda brands, Polar's been around for a long time, and they have a bunch of really great soft drinks in addition to the bubbly waters or carbonated waters, whatever you want to call it. They have one that's really, really good called Orange Dry, which is basically like Orangina, if anybody has ever tried that.
It is. Orangina is a super good French drink.
Yes.
I think you can get it in the United States nowadays, but back when we were kids, I think that it was mostly France. But
there was one gourmet grocery store in Marion or Mattapoisett that had it, and it would always be a big treat when we'd go and buy the cool looking glass bottles. Nice. But anyway, Orange Dry is basically a domestic version of Orangina, and I'll tell you what, if you want the easiest and best margarita mixer out there, just add tequila to either Orangina or Orange Dry from Polar. That's all you need. Slice of lime, rim the glass, you're good to go. It's awesome.
I've never thought of that. That's crazy. I could
It's
definitely see that being amazing, though.
really, really good. Really good. So there we go. We have our drinks. They are potentially a little less exciting than usual, but I guess we still have a lot to say about them. So there's that.
Yeah.
So, like we said, the idea with today's episode is basically to talk about how we are planning on packing for the event. We, for the purposes of this episode, are going to assume that we are both going to be going for Scorpius. Whether or not that actually happens remains to be seen. But we're going to be operating under the assumption that we're going to be bringing a minimum of 5 keywords, potentially 6. That way we would be able to swap, out on the, not get stuck with one master in a round. We'd have a little bit more flexibility. So I know, if you're talking about taking 5 or 6 keywords, packing space becomes a significant issue, especially if you're going to be flying to an event. So in addition to just saying, yeah, I'm going to take these keywords, we actually took it a step further and said, what models do we actually need from these keywords? What can we avoid taking multiples of to save on bag space? And we kind of drilled it down to a couple of different categories. Essentially, we have our top priority models, which are going to be required. You have to have these to effectively play the keywords in our opinions. We've got our preferred models, which we really want to take if we have space, and we almost certainly will. We've got the optionals, which if we are really running short on space, these are the ones that we'd consider just leaving home. And then there's the bench models, which we're just not going to take at all. I'm just going to go ahead and say that, while we're actually recording this, there is a very good likelihood that I will change my mind on some of these while we're talking, and I'm sure Brandon feels the same way.
Oh, I feel very strongly that I will change my mind.
I already see 1 or 2 models in here that I'm going to be moving around, so that'll be a part of the episode. We'll do it in real time. Wild. I've also included on my sheet anyway, I have a couple of models that I have pointed out as important tech models. This is not necessarily every tech piece model in the faction. These are models that I would say, let's say I decide I am not going to bring Infamous, for example. I would still want to make sure that I have any of these key models from that keyword packed in my bags, even if I'm not bringing the whole keyword. So like I've highlighted them in this pretty kind of lilac-y purple color. And we'll talk about those a little bit as we go. We're not really going to be going into detail on the rounds. I do have the rounds shared in the video so that they're available for us to reference and for everybody else to take a quick look at. We will briefly talk about the masters that we might consider for those rounds, depending on the declared faction of our opponents, the map, that kind of thing. Because there's some variables in there, we're not really going to actually firmly decide on masters. We're not going to talk about actual lists because there's too many unknowns that would affect those choices. So let's get a move on, shall we, Brandon?
Yeah.
So before we actually get into all of the individual rounds, what I'll say is if we're planning on Scorpiusing, we don't really need to look at our stable of models that we have available from a faction and then say, okay, I'm going to play this model, this master in this pool, this master in this pool. You kind of know that you're just going to have to take at minimum your best 5 masters. And in my opinion, you really want a 6th one in there. But what do you think about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I think that there definitely are some circumstances where the plans can change. I know at least in, every time that I've tried to go for a Scorpius, I've gotten to a point where, oh, my opponent has declared this faction. I've seen that they have this master. I know that they're Scorpiusing or not Scorpiusing, and my plan master for this round was this master. In like I did it with Neverborn at Nova last year, and I walked into Pandora. My proposed plan was Pandora, and I ended up playing up against a guild player. I think it was Nick Westbrook. I'm like pretty sure. And I was like, okay, well, my whole game plan with Pandora was to take the Hooded Rider, put a bunch of hazard stores, and move people around through it that are key targets. And you know what's really good against that? Leadline Cloak.
Yes. True story.
So, they're definitely. I think I ended up switching out. I think I did end up going for the Scorpius. I played 5 different crews, but I brought literally the whole faction. So,
Yeah.
um, it was having a 6th backup if you're going for Scorpius is definitely a strong thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, have your plan for what master you're going to try and play in each scheme pool, but having that flex slot is really really important in some matchups.
Yeah, definitely. And especially where like there are definitely some factions that it's just legitimately harder to pack the entire faction. So a good example of that would be like I think Neverborn would be a great example because they have a lot of very big models. I mean, if you're talking about taking literally everything, and you have to take into account, your Euripides and your Groot slangs and
the Euripides, the whole keyword, the whole Savage keyword is just 50 mils, except for like 4 models.
Yeah.
And that not only just 50 mils, but assuming you're doing like some sort of magnet storage situation, like you're taking up almost the whole case with just that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're so big.
Yeah.
And whereas if you're playing Guild, every single model in the entire faction is basically a man-sized guy, except for the horse boys, right?
Yeah.
So, it's again, Neverborn gets the shaft, I guess.
And there are some additional. This is just kind of a logistical consideration, but like Brandon and I are very fortunate in that we're taking the train, and luggage getting jostled around or banged around isn't really a problem.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to
never do this if I were flying.
No,
I just wouldn't.
no. So, I mean, if you're driving, obviously it's no big deal. If you're taking a train, which obviously aren't available in all parts of the country, we happen to be spoiled with cheap and accessible rail travel here in the Northeast. Less of an issue. Still some consideration, just because you might not have eyes on your bag the whole time, and you don't want to do something that's going to be kind of flimsy. If you're flying, then you really have to start thinking hard about what you're going to pack. And if you're flying and planning on Scorpiusing, then good luck. I mean, I probably wouldn't even do that unless I were like basically customizing an extra little suitcase with foam and figuring out a way that I could bring all the models that I need.
Yeah, I to be comfortable doing that, I would have to have a foam tray specifically designed for each of my models, and I just don't. I hate storing Malifaux in foam. There definitely are games that foam works. Metal models are great in foam. It doesn't matter. Lots of bigger models, but Malifaux models are just small enough of a scale and just flimsy enough with their plastic bits that there are some models that you just can't store in foam. It's just not viable. Magnet storage. That's
magnet storage is the way to go, and that's actually something that I've recently finally branched out into is magnetic storage. I would say if you are planning on flying, I would not recommend trying to use magnetic storage. I have seen it work if you have a very, very, some very strong magnets that you can use on the bases. Just make sure that you're very comfortable with, potentially having to lay your case on the side to get it in the overhead bins, and certainly don't check it. No way. If you're planning on taking models with you to a event that you're going to be flying to, they better be in your overhead storage because there's nowhere else.
Realistically, if you're flying with models, you should be prepared to refuse to board the plane if they make you check the bag, and hope for a backup option. Like go early so that if you have to be like, I'll wait for the next flight, I can't check this, is like actually a thing that you should legitimately plan for. That's not.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I'm going to be taking strongly into consideration when I go to the the Lone Star Fodown. I need to stop calling it the Houston GT. The Lone Star Fodown in October, because I will be flying to that, and I am definitely not going to be Scorpiusing. And I'm probably going to be bringing a very limited selection of models to that event.
Same. I don't know what my plan is for that yet. I haven't quite frankly thought about it. We have about a month after Nova to figure that out. But I don't know. I'm not sure what we're going to do. What we're going to do about that.
I'm probably going to end up basically bringing like 2 keywords and just soloing one and using the other one as a backup. I wouldn't be at all surprised if I do that. But anyway, that is the Lone Star Fodown, and that is not Nova. But that does get into a little bit of the packing considerations and kind of the reason that I thought that this might be a valuable exercise, not just for Brandon and I, but for really anybody that's planning on traveling to an event. Or if you just want to find down the list of models that you want to bring so that you don't overwhelm yourself with choices.
Yeah.
So I think that probably what we'll do is let's just briefly overview all 5 rounds. We can make any comments on the pools as we go. Not really talking about which masters we would for sure stick in them, but if we do have one that we're pretty comfortable with, we can certainly mention it. After we go through the 5 rounds and just share our observations, then we can go through our lists. And I think that what we'll do is we'll probably have me do one keyword, then you do one keyword, and we'll just kind of alternate until we go down through the list. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. So for round 1, we have Wedge, Carve a Path with Catch and Release, Public Demo, Secret Meetup, Hidden Martyrs, and Sabotage. So pretty cool round 1. I think starting off with a wedge deployment is definitely gonna help people shake some rust off pretty quick. That's for sure. Overall, I mean, I like this pool. It's got some interesting combinations of schemes that you could do for scoring. I mean, we have a lot of stuff that you would be naming models or terrain pieces for. I mean, basically everything in here you have to, everything in here you have to name a model or a terrain piece for, which I don't know if that was a conscious decision on Jeff's part. I think Jeff's the one that was actually putting together these pools, but pretty cool idea. What do you think about this one, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I think, definitely a lot of selection. There's going to be a lot of murder happening immediately with Carve a Path and with Wedge. I think that's super, super likely. You're going to see a lot of people with a lot of fast-moving stuff, a lot of hopefully sort of what do you call it? Not anti-schemers, but anti-schemer schemers.
Yeah.
The schemers that can get around things and take a punch once or twice. In general, like Secret Meetup's a trap if you don't have an Obey Master or a buttload of movement effects. I think that's definitely something to consider. If your opponent's playing Arcanists, they're obviously going to take Public Demonstration because they're going to take 6 Steam Arachnids and a Trench Coat. They're just some things that you can assume, right?
Yeah,
and I think
for sure.
I think that Hidden Martyrs is probably my favorite scheme. And there are a number of crews. I like this is 1,000%. I'm playing Wunschtook in this pool. Absolutely that's happening. I'm going to yeet my Pickle Ricks down the board, and then Pickle Rick. I have a Rick and Morty themed Wunschtook crew. So Pickle Ricks are student Evisceras. And so punch the marker round 1, and then do some charging and nonsense. Is my plan. But Wedge Carve a Path is a bloody game.
Yeah. And I think we didn't even say what factions we're doing, are we? We probably should have done that.
Oh, right. Well,
what are you going to be playing at Nova, Brandon?
Well, I'm on Rezzers this year. So from
Rezzers.
Captain Con to Captain Con, I will be playing Resurrectionists. And maybe I'll change my mind for Captain Con, but certainly for this and for Nova and for the Houston event, I will be on Resurrectionists.
And Resurrectionists being my least favorite faction to deal with. If we end up having to play more than 2 games against each other this weekend, we're going to have a very quiet train ride home.
Nice.
Yes. I will be playing Bayou for Nova Open, and I have decided that in all likelihood I'm going to end up playing 10 Thunders for the Houston GT, although I did kind of get a little bit of I don't know, we'll call it an inkling that I might make a change there. And you know what? I'm really thinking hard about just soloing Ivan at the Fodown. Because why not, right?
That's certainly a decision.
Wild.
No one, sir. I don't think anybody who hasn't played Malifaux for more than 2 years will have any idea how to play against you because they've never seen that model on the table.
Yes. So we'll see. And that would certainly make packing extremely easy. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be wild. Wow.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it. I might have to talk myself off the ledge with that one, because otherwise I'm just going to end up, having a miserable time. But,
yeah. Might I recommend not doing that, perhaps?
Well, that'd probably be wise, but we'll see.
I mean, unless there's some secret crazy Ivan errata coming.
No, there's not that I'm aware of.
I'm pretty confident that's not a thing.
I just really
Just Ivan 2?
No, I would probably end up just playing Ivan 1 every single game.
Yep, that's the correct decision. I mean, they're both wrong decisions, quite frankly.
Yeah,
but,
they're both wrong decisions.
Play what you want, for sure. But no, what are you talking about? Just play Yoko.
Yeah, that
Bring
would
just
be
Yoko.
a winning
End of
strategy.
discussion.
That would be a winning strategy,
Oh my
especially
God.
given that I tend to play Ivan very in keyword. So bad decisions abound.
Wild stuff.
Anyway, that said, round 2, since we've already had our first little tangent of the afternoon here. So round 2, we have corner, guard the stash, assassinate, in your face, set the trap, spread them out, and sabotage. So for this round, I really like this particular one because we do have a diagonal guard, which I do like a little bit better than horizontal guard. You have the opportunity in this round to go either very aggressive and go for stuff like, assassinate, in your face, and then just basically clearing the board so that you can declare a second scheme later in the game. Or you can try to avoid the fight and play a little cagey and then go for stuff like spread them out, sabotage, that kind of thing. So I like that there's going to be a variety of options in this particular round. I'm not going to feel like I'm going to get kind of, pushed into a corner to play one specific keyword. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, there's a real split down the middle. I mean, with guard the stash, obviously, aggressively, you want to kill your opponent's models and be where you need to be, but defensively, you want to be places and be tanky. So if you're this scheme pool very much lends itself to a tanky scheming crew where you can just be places and put schemes down. So you can go spread them out. You can go set the trap if you wanted to, sabotage even. I think the second half. I think that you also could just do the kill thing, right? I think one of the best ways to win guard the stash is to kill your opponent's entire crew so that they can't guard their stashes. Assassinating in your face certainly help that.
Yeah, definitely. This is a round that I would strongly consider taking Trixie because you can build. It's kind of funny. You can build a Trixie crew in so many different ways. I could theoretically build a fully functional, solid crew with that keyword that has no models that my opponent could score in your face off of. The only option that they would have was to have one of their models get killed next to one of the masters. Because I believe the minimum for that is 8 stones. And I could easily make a 7 stone and under Trixie crew that can still accomplish everything in the scheme pool. So that I would say Ma, pretty good chance that I'd see her in round 2. And then, I didn't really say what I might consider for round 1, but I'm going to go back and just say that is a round that I would probably consider Zip in. I like Zip in Carve a Path a lot.
For sure.
This particular pool is pretty decent for him, but I'll reserve the right to hold him until a later round because, again, I'm going to have lots of time to put more mental cycles into this. But what do you have a master that you'd be kind of leaning towards for round 2, Brandon?
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to say just because I think out of all of the keywords or the crews that I'm preparing, but were this is one of the crews that I have the least reps on, but I really feel confident that I could do well with Seamus. I think that just going the straight, I'm gonna murder you with guard the stash markers, popping out of nowhere, blowing people's faces off, assassinate for sure. Which makes me very nervous because there are just some masters that you can't assassinate. And depending on their build up, I think they'll know that I'm playing Seamus before they decide how many take a hit models to include. So, but I think guard the stash with assassinate in your face. I'd probably try and go Seamus. I think that's what I would like
cool.
to do.
Yeah, I can dig it. All right, so round 3, we've got flank, covert operation with secret meetup, vendetta, set the trap, leave your mark, and load them up. So pretty cool round again. Hats off to Jeff for making some very interesting pools. We have another flank and marker type situation, which I like diagonal covert just as much as I like corner guard. It's a great combination. In terms of the schemes, vendetta is one that I tend to kind of fall into the trap of taking more than I should, and there's a lot of player agency on my opponent's part. So sometimes I can have a little bit of trouble with that one, but I tend to skew into it anyway. Load 'em up is a great scheme in general. And I think that for flank covert, I would probably, you know what? I'm going to say with this one, I'd feel pretty comfortable taking Angler into this. Angler is excellent at Leave Your Mark because Bog is ridiculous. They're very, very good at Load 'em Up. Pretty easy to score that with Tide Markers, and Tide Markers not being destructible and also very small tends to make it kind of difficult for opponents to pick them up. And they certainly have some pretty good vendettas out there. I mean, Auntie Mel is basically Vendetta in like a little size 1 package. And there's usually going to be something that she can choose as the enemy Vendetta target. So I would say Angler is my hot take pick for this round. How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, I think that this pool is in a lot goes in a lot of different directions, and I think there's a lot of flexibility here. I think that I have enough. I think I have enough reps on Revenant that I probably would declare Riva here. I think Riva is a slam dunk with Load 'em Up. I think Leave Your Mark is a real valid premise. I think I could also pretty easily handle Vendetta. Vincent's a beast. Or even the Draugr. I think there's a number of different ways you can build a Reva crew, but I think I'd probably go there.
Cool. Dig it. All right, so we've got round 4, standard Carve a Path with public demo, secret meetup, hidden martyrs, breakthrough, and Load 'em Up. So second, this is our duplicate scheme for the event. So we're gonna, or duplicate strategy for the event rather. We are gonna see Carve a Path. We have, I tend to lean towards taking breakthrough just because a lot of the crews that I play tend to be pretty mobile. I do actually like breakthrough in standard for the crews that I do use for it, because it tends to make it a little bit more difficult for my opponent to deny. And as long as I have a model that's fast enough to get to their deployment zone, most of the time it's just kind of easy points. Carve a Path is a pretty solid strategy for a couple of different Bayou Masters. And, I take a look at the rest of the stuff and I've got some, again, things that I need to make declarations for. I've got your public demo, I've got your hidden martyrs, secret meetup. I would say playing something with lures might make a little bit of sense, because you kind of drain some of your opponent's efficiency. You know what? It's probably not the right call, but I would say there's a good chance that I would actually consider playing Whizbang in this one. No lures to speak of, but very, very fast models. Basically, the entire keyword has easy access to fast. So I can get to my opponent's backfield. Basically, everything in the crew can do the walk interact, or the interact walk interact thing. I could, in theory, do Load 'em Up, but I would just have to dedicate an AP from Wong every turn to do it. And I would say breakthrough is definitely going to happen. Martyrs is pretty easy to guarantee, because I have enough fast, fragile models that I can use one to score and then the other one to kind of beat feet off into a safe position until the end of the game. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Whizbang on that one.
Yeah, I like the scheme pool. I really like Carver Path in general as a strategy. And there's a lot of play here. I think the other thing I think actually that's also super important to recognize about this pool is this is the first pool of day 2.
Mm-hmm.
So this is potentially, depending on whether you're at the Danger Planet karaoke or not, this is going to be something that we have a bit of a fresher mind for, I guess. You've had some rest ideally, and so you're looking at having the ability to play what is potentially a more complex crew.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot better than in round 2, 3, or 5. Certainly, maybe not round 1, but I think that I probably, just for nature of Scorpiusing, I think I'd rather play Von Stuck here, but I think I would likely go with Jackdaw. I think that Daw 2 has some very strong breakthrough game. I think that you almost couldn't stop him, quite frankly. I think I could theoretically maybe do some secret meetup public demonstration nonsense. But more than anything else, I think breakthrough, and I could very easily hidden martyrs.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love hidden martyrs. It's like my favorite scheme. And I think that I have probably even less reps on Jackdaw than Seamus here. But that's what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of tossed up a little bit on this one between playing Zoraida or playing Wong in the Whizbang keyword. I think that a lot of that would come down to my opponent's faction declaration. Zoraida's pretty strong, I feel like, in this pool. Either Zoraida 1 or Zoraida 2 could work very, very well.
Sure.
Just because you have so much mobility, you have ability to knock your opponent's models out of position, you have access to lots of lures, you have super fast models. Like, she's kind of like the total package. And it's not...
Zoraida 1, I think, is just hands down the only master that I feel very confident Secret Meetup works with.
Yeah. Right? I mean, you can almost guarantee it with Zoraida 1. The only thing you have to be a little bit aware of is just the fact that the carve markers do give concealment, which Zoraida really super hates. But if you're careful about positioning and you can Eyes in the Night through better spots, then it can work. It can work. Yeah. So I would probably have to wait until the day of to decide what I was going to do there. Another thing, and this is going to...
That might even be a seeing the table call.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It could be a seeing the table call. If there's a ton of concealing terrain there, then Zoraida's probably not the right call, and I want to take Wong instead. The other little thing that I would build on Brandon's little pro tip there for the day 2 conversation is great idea that if you're actually trying to podium at a 5-round event, that you kind of take it easy on the night, the first night, because invariably your opponents may not. And that does actually give you an advantage. Plus, you won't feel like crap the whole second day. I have learned that lesson over many years. And I do my best to make sure that when we go to dinner, I don't drink anything until I've already stuffed my belly to the point of fullness. I guarantee that I'm probably not going to wake up with a hangover. And karaoke is a dangerous thing indeed. So,
ooh,
yeah.
The 3 rounds of Gen Con they were a time this year.
Yeah,
let me tell you.
I'll tell you the times that my plan has failed me. Have basically been when I've decided that I am too full to have another beer, but I still want something to drink, and then I move on to cocktails or shots, and then things go downhill. So we're not going to do that this year. Round 5.
At least not between round 3 and 4.
At least not between round 3 and 4. Round 5. Corner cursed objects. Whew, man. We have public demo, assassinate, leave your mark, break through, and spread them out. So round 5, I'm going to want something that I can kind of play on rote. I'm going to want something that is solid in cursed. I think Kin. Good old-fashioned Ophelia 1 is probably what I take in this round. Probably the best cursed objects crew that Bayou has. Again, this is going to depend significantly on the board, how busy it is, how much terrain, especially concealing terrain, because they really hate concealment in that crew. But, I mean, we've got Assassinate, which is ace for them. Leave Your Mark is a fantastic kill now, scheme later sort of scheme. The other ones, you can't really do public demo with Ophelia, so that's sort of off the table. Breakthrough's tough in corner. Spread them out is doable, but not ideal, especially for that crew, because it's kind of a stand and shoot thing. So I think that if I do play Ophelia, my opponent is going to know exactly which schemes I'm going for. It's just a matter of whether they can actually do anything to stop me from scoring them. Yeah. So yeah, there we go. What do you think, Brandon?
I mean, there's a lot of killing, there's a lot of moving, there's a lot of scheming. I think I will say I would as a strong consideration potentially think about taking Castor as my round 4 master. But if I did end up going with Jackdaw, I likely would end up playing Castor and the returned keyword in round 5. Failing that, I think I'd be comfortable with McMorning just because he's probably the master I have the second most reps on. But I don't think he particularly shines here. I think that there's definitely some room for it. I mean, hire a Kentoroi, that's a wild thought. But there are definitely some things that I would do. I would consider doing. The only reason I don't like McMorning, I definitely would go McMorning. McMorning 2, um, is because it's cursed objects, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that there's a better pool or place to put him. And if we sometimes if if you're down to the last two options, I think I'd probably go Gastor, quite
Mm-hmm.
frankly, and then just leave McMorning on the table. But
There you go.
yeah.
Cool. So that's our round. That's our preliminary guesses at what we would take. I'm sure that we're going to put a lot more thought into this as we get closer to the event. And again, to Brandon's point before, what we actually choose is going to depend significantly on the opposing faction declaration and what the table looks like. Also, our opponents. We know some of the people that are going to be there. We'll have a good sense of what they play. And there's a lot of meta knowledge that's going to come into play as well. So we've already kind of talked about the crews that we are planning on bringing. I'm just going to run through my list real quick, just in case anybody missed anything. What I've decided on my 6 crews to get packed are going to be Trixie with Ma Tucket, Kin and Ophelia, Infamous and Captain Zip, Whizbang and Wong, Angler and the Clampets, and Swamp Fiend and Zoraida. Brandon, we'll swap over to your sheet so we can see what you got. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Transmortis with Von Stuck is the crew that I'm by far the most comfortable with. I played him in all 3 rounds of Gen Con. I'm not very confident, but I'm more confident than anything else. I have a good number of reps with Castor, so I'll be taking the return for sure. I will definitely be bringing Experimental with McMorning. He is the master I have the second most reps on. And I think that assuming that I can get her painted in time, I will be taking Reva with the Revenant keyword, and then Seamus with Red Chapel, which also hopefully I can paint the couple models I still have left in time. And then Jackdaw with Tormented is my flex choice, which is the one I'm going to worry the least about painting.
There you go. So, with that said, why don't we talk a little bit about what you are choosing not to bring and why? So, here's the list of different masters that you have access to, the ones that you've decided to leave home, unless I missed something. We're going to be Yanlo, Molly, and Kirai, correct?
Correct.
So, why don't you tell the good listeners why you've decided to leave them at home?
Yeah, I think I am. Yanlo, I think, definitely has game. I don't think that he is nearly as point click delete as he used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Yanlo 2 is definitely something that needs a lot of play and a lot of time. And I've never played a single game with him. There's no way that I could be ready in time to play a master that requires. I think he's just very cagey. That's his whole premise. He's a super cagey late game master, and I just don't. That's not a good tournament choice
No.
in general, unless you can play very quickly, which you cannot do if you do not have reps.
Right, right. And then how about Molly?
So
Good darling,
same
Miss
same
Molly.
sort of same deal, I think, right? Molly is a very scheming oriented crew. I think that there's a lot of interaction and a lot of micro decisions that you need to make about when to pitch cards, because her whole fading situation is which card to pitch to get which benefit when. She's not outrightly killy, so in the event that I'm pinned against the wall without really a lot of reps and experience in her keyword, she'll just die. And that is not good for tournaments, and certainly not good for doing well.
Yeah. And then last but not least, Kirai and Koku.
Yeah, so Kirai is I haven't even built her. I have
Great
the models.
reason.
They're just I certainly I think she's a little bit more schemy, but can definitely do a whole bunch of murder. And I have literally built 0 of the models in the Kirai crew, outside of the ones that come pre-built in the versatile ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have those. I'll have those, but I don't. Yeah, there's not time. If I had more time,
Yeah.
I would definitely consider taking Kirai. I think that she's really strong outside of cursed objects. As a primarily summoning related master, I think that that's problematic. But
Yeah.
I would love to have taken her. I just don't have time or reps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can see a place for her in what do you call it? Covert op. Like, I think she's pretty solid there. But yeah, I think especially if you haven't played her, you haven't built her. She's just not going to make the cut.
Yeah.
True story. So I'll go ahead and do mine. So the masters that I have not taken are going to be Ulix, the Brewmaster, sad as that may be, and good old Summerteeth Jones. So Ulix was a tough call for me because I really do love playing him. I think the biggest issue with Ulix is that there's just too much luck of the dice involved. If you draw badly or if you flip badly, that crew has very limited amount of influence over the strength of your deck and the strength of your hand. And I've just had too many games where I've been left out in the cold. The other thing, and this is an experience piece, is I have not played very much Ulix 2. I've played like 2 games. And while I do love Ulix 1, and a lot of people think that he's a great master, not having the ability to use what I consider to be the stronger version of the master competently was enough to have me leave him at home for now. Brewmaster,
very reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, Brewmaster I love to death. He has some kind of narrow strengths. This particular gaining grounds, especially after his errata, is like marginal for him. I think that Brew 2 can still work and has a lot of play, but I don't have enough reps, and that is a very complicated crew. I play Brew 1. I used to play Brew 1 a lot, and again, pretty narrow strengths. He was one of the best beaters that the faction had access to when M3E launched. I just don't really think that he holds up well to the current climate. There's a lot of other masters that just kind of outdo him on damage, and he has too many weaknesses, especially with the amount of shooting that's available in the game now as opposed to what there was when he first came out. And Summer, I mean, I'm not going to beat the guy up. I know we have a Summerteeth Jones rework coming out. If by some miracle it finished, it came out in the next couple of weeks, then, maybe I'd have to reevaluate that. But he's just not really in a good place. He can't really accomplish a whole lot very efficiently, and it makes it very difficult for you to hire in tech models, which you really need to be able to do going into a big tournament, just because any out of keyword models that you take with his crew tend to weaken the crew on the whole. So there's my 3 and why they stayed at home. On your list of 6 models, Brandon, or 6 masters rather, is there one that you'd really consider kind of to be your flex piece, but not necessarily one of the primaries that you'd reach to?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that that's McMorning. I think that although I do really like McMorning, I think that he's just not in a great place as far as being super useful in this gaining grounds. I think that he definitely has strengths for sure, and especially he's particularly unforgiving if the opponent really just doesn't have a lot of interaction with him or how to deal with his nonsense. But it's specifically in this scheme pool, I think that there just are better choices in almost every round. I don't think that that's necessarily the case for the Open. I'm sorry for no, this is the Open, right? This is the Open.
Yeah, this is the Open.
I don't think that's the case for Masters. I think that I will likely end up playing him then. But that's we're not talking about that. So
right.
So he's coming with me regardless. But he's definitely if I end up having to swap somebody out, that's where it's at. And I really feel pretty strongly that if I do end up swapping it out, it will be instead of Castor.
For me, my flex master is actually going to be Kin and Ophelia, mostly because it's a keyword that in its current state, given the fact that it's seen quite a few nerfs, I don't think that it has what it needs to just play into, more or less any crew and just bully its way through the opponent the way that it used to.
Yeah.
I would say that it's the one that has probably the narrowest strengths, but if I do always want to have it in the bag, because if I see something like round 5, I'm like, well, there's a bunch of masters that I could play into that, and which one I end up deciding on is probably going to come down to what I haven't, just what I haven't played yet and how it compares against Ophelia for that last round and the opponent that I'm going to be up against. So I would say she's definitely my flex. The other ones I'm going to feel very comfortable with. The only caveat to that I would add is that Angler is a very strong keyword, but it is far and away the one that I have the least number of reps with. So if I do end up putting it on the table, it's going to be the closest to cold of any of the keywords that I'm going to be bringing. So I would say in this particular situation, based on my experience level, while I do feel like they have enough raw power that I could probably just kind of stumble my way through some games, that might actually, for this event, be the one that's more of the flex for me. I'm going to just see if I can get some games in and do some solo practice on my own to make sure I have my turn 1 down pat before we go. But I'm not as confident in that keyword as I am in the rest of them. So there you go. So that pretty much wraps up that segment. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to run through our list of models. I'm going to take one keyword, and then Brandon's going to move on to one of his keywords. And we're just going to talk about which buckets we dropped these models into, being, again, required, so something you 100% need to have. Preferred, meaning I almost certainly want to take these. And I can't really see leaving them home unless I absolutely had to. Optional are going to be models that you could leave home based on storage space concerns in your bags. And then bench are going to be models that you just straight up aren't going to bring. If you take a look at my breakdown here, you'll notice, and I'll get into this in just a sec, but some of these models I consider one to be required, the second one to be optional, the third one to be, the second one to be preferred, and then the third one to be optional. There are some of them that I even have one in the required slot and then the rest of them in the bench slot, because I can never really see myself taking more than one of them. So with all that said, let's just kind of get into it. So Trixie and Ma Tucket. So for required models, Ma 1 is my preferred version of the master. Ma 2, I would say I like having the flexibility to play her, but I don't feel like she's just across the board as reliable or powerful as Ma Tucket 1. So I'm going to say that Ma 2 is actually going to be one of the masters that I might not even end up breaking out. Key reasons for that are basically going to be those of consistency and card draw. I feel like Ma 1, she has the ability to use chores to affect the game based on the initiative flip. She's got a lot more card draw. She hits very hard. She's very mobile. And while Ma 2 does have some really great tech and some stuff that you don't really see anywhere else in faction, including a scamper model with a 2-inch engage, which is extraordinarily good, I just feel like most of the time I'm going to end up reaching for Ma 1 unless I get a really gnarly matchup. So Ma 2, she's a maybe. Little less, of course, I need. Rock Hopper, I'm really only going to use the Rock Hopper if I play Ma 2, so I don't feel like I'm obligated to put him in there if I just simply don't have space in my bags. I always feel like I'm going to want one test subject just because they're phenomenal low-cost models and they combo extraordinarily well with Big Brain Bryn and then a couple other things that I like to play. 2 test subjects I've played on occasion. I've really never played with 3, but they're a good and cheap enough model that if I feel like just having some fun because I'm getting cronked in, the first couple of rounds and I'm nowhere near placing, I might, crack out a 3rd test subject and do a really wacky crew. I feel like I always need 1 Soulstone Miner because they're good. I don't think I would ever place 2 Soulstone Miners, though. So you've played a lot of Arcanists, Brandon, so I'd be interested to hear your feedback on that. But what do you think?
Yeah, I don't ever see hiring a second one, even in keyword, right? I get the gimmick, and they definitely do stuff. I think more so than the Outcast version of the Get Some Soulstones guys, the Prospector.
Mm-hmm.
Prospector, yeah. I like them for scheming for sure. Teleporting to wherever they want, huge deal. That's very, very good. But I just don't like. I'm just never gonna take more than one.
No.
And yeah, that's it. I have them both painted. I would build them.
Yeah.
But I've only ever taken one.
Yeah, I mean, I can see some very, very narrow situations where I might consider a second one. Basically, like, if I am going to be taking Bryn and I'm playing against a keyword that relies heavily on resistance triggers, good example of that would be like Shtuk, because, I do have access to armor piercing. They always ignore resistance triggers with their attacks. And then, something that's going to be dropping a ton of destructible terrain just because they do have Demolitionist and you can do some kind of cheeky things with or Thriller Driller. You can do some kind of cheeky things with denying load them up by just unburying them on your half of the table in an inconvenient spot for your opponent, and then thriller drilling and just clearing out a huge chunk of pit traps or, whatever other markers your opponent has dropped down. I think that that's narrow enough that yeah. You know what? I'm going to say this is my first one. So I'm actually going to move Soulstone Miners over to optional because I just convinced myself that number 2 might actually be worth it in enough situations that I'm going to consider taking it. So there's my first adjustment. Moving on, I've got Survivors. I think 1 Survivor's phenomenal. There are, some games that I might consider 2. I don't really think I would ever have a reason to play 3, though, so I'm actually going to go ahead and move the 3rd one over to the bench. So we're kind of doing a little swippy swap with the Soulstone Miners. Bushwhacker 1, 2, and 3 are always. I play them a lot, and I think that they are just absolutely one of the most perfectly balanced minions probably in the game. They're amazing. I know a lot of people don't play Rooster Rider so much. If I end up playing Ma into a very kind of cagey, spread out game, especially if there's going to be like breakthrough in the pool, I'm actually going to consider taking 1. And there are some games that I might even end up taking 2 of them. So I have those in my required list. I don't think I would ever play 3. So I'm actually going to move that over to my bench, mostly because I can't think of a situation that I would use all 3, and they do take up kind of a lot of space in the bag. They're also very fragile. They tend to break off at the ankles really easily, so they're not going to make the cut. Trixie Belle is 100% required. Sparks, I'm going to say I'm going to keep him in required, just because there are enough games that I might consider taking him in keyword, and he doesn't really take up that much storage space, so I don't think I'm going to have a tough time fitting him in. And then I've got Big Brain Bryn, who is actually going to be my first model that I would consider to be an important tech piece. If for whatever reason I decided I was not going to play Trixie in any event, I would always bring Bryn. The other adjustment that I'm going to actually make here is I had originally put Ruffles in my bench. I am actually going to say that I'm going to make space for Ruffles because after I made this crew, I thought a little bit more about what I used to use him for, which was basically like running in and denying ley lines in the last Gaining Grounds. And I feel like that still works in this Gaining Grounds because he's a low priority activation. He's pretty quick movement, and it's pretty easy for him to just double walk next to a marker that my opponent's trying to score guard or covert off of, and then craze chickening to knock them off of it and scoring it himself. So I don't think that I would take him like all the time, but I am going to say I'm going to squeeze him into the optional category just because I think there are enough situations that I might consider taking him. I'm not going to put him all the way up to preferred though. So any quick thoughts on my little breakdown of the keyword there, Brandon?
No, I mean, you're definitely right about Bryn. I think there's no world that if you own this model, you don't take it every time you go anywhere and play Bayou.
Yeah.
And everything else looks really solid.
Great. Awesome. Let's move on to your first, shall we? Take us through Transmortis.
So, Transmortis. I think that in almost every circumstance where you're wanting to play Transmortis as a keyword, Von Stuck 2 just does a better job at everything you want to do than Von Stuck 1. I think that there are very few circumstances, I think, where that's hugely different. And so for most cases, I think Von Stuck 2 is pretty much who I'll pick, which is why I have Von Stuck 2 in the required and Von Stuck 1 in the optional. It is worth noting that in the event that I decide to bring Von Stuck 1, it is going to change the math a little on a couple of things, mostly the summonable models, because they don't, there are models in this keyword that you will never hire under any circumstances, I think, ever, but summoning them is actually pretty rad, in this case, the undergrads. But let's say, obviously we're going to bring the research assistant. You can't not have that. It's his totem. It comes for free. We also have Anna Lovelace and the Valedictorian, who are both my first 2 important tech models. The Valedictorian, I think, less so, because I think the Valedictorian is just an amazing beater. And that's sort of what you take her for, which is great out of keyword as well. But Anna Lovelace has 2 really impressive auras that I think almost always there is a concern. Like every time you build a Resurrectionist list, you really got to be thinking about what you're playing with and whether or not you want to take Anna Lovelace. Gravity Well means your opponent can't place models within 6 of her. Hostile Work Environment means that you can't put any sort of enemies targeting their own things, and that disrupts so many crews. It's ridiculous. So we have Anna Lovelace and the Valedictorian that are definitely auto includes, but also required that I take them wherever I go. I think that both Students of Viscera are definitely going to happen in any time I go with Von Stuck. I don't always take one. I don't always take two, but I think that they're by far the best students models in the game in his keyword. And I'm always going to keep one Necropunk with me. There are definitely lists where I'll hire only a single Necropunk. But in the preferred, literally, I have one model in the preferred column, and that's the second Necropunk. I think that there definitely are times where I want to take a second Necropunk for sure, and that doesn't, and that pretty much, and then that gets us to the optional list. I think that if I have room, I'll bring Von Stuck 1, which means that I'm going to be bringing at least 1 or 2 undergrads, 1 or 2 students of Steel, 1 or 2 students of Sinew. And certainly the third Necropunk. And then I think we also have Student of Steel is a viable tech pick occasionally in Von Stuck if you're going up against like a robot list. So if you're playing Hoffman, if you're playing a group that's very, very, I don't know what else is heavily armored.
Like Foundry, Mayfang.
Yeah, Foundry, Mayfang.
Some tricksy keyword, to be honest. I mean, it just,
Other Transmortis somehow.
Yeah.
You know, I think Student of Steel is viable. Outside of those circumstances, I wouldn't ever really hire one. I would only seek to summon them with Von Stuck 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the bench, if I don't end up bringing Von Stuck 1, I'm not bringing any undergrads. There's no point. I'm never going to hire that model. I'm never going to hire the third Student of Steel, and I'm never going to hire a Student of Sinew.
Yeah.
And then there are a bunch of versatiles that I think are just I wasn't really sure where to put those, but they're always on my list. Specifically, I think calls out for Von Stuck 2 is Enslaved Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Enslaved Spirits are so unbelievably good with Von Stuck. For especially Von Stuck 2, and especially for a bunch of reasons. Letting him move around is great. Being able to drop the ski markers when they die is also actively beneficial to his game plan.
Mm-hmm. This is one that
I will always include those.
I'd be interested in getting just a little bit more feedback from you on Von Stuck 1 being in the optional. Do you really feel like Von Stuck 2 is that much better and can do the same things that you look for in 1?
Yeah, I think I really do. Yeah, the only thing that I think is even slightly the call, I guess, is academic superiority. So like if I'm playing against Marcus, if I'm playing against Ophelia, maybe, you know, there's some in some cases, but even then, you know, I just don't I don't find myself really caring that I have that, you know, because it's only within 6 of him, and ideally, I mean, he is certainly more of an aggressive master, but it's through Gruesome Lecture and his blast ability. It's not through just melee, and I miss sort of the summonable nature of him, but summon models don't do anything. You know, they do stuff sometimes. They definitely kill things better, but you know what kills things better? Models that are focused and faster and shielded, so they can't die and can do more killing.
Yeah, and I think that the win more summoning style of Stuck, while very strong on its face, isn't going to be quite as effective in this gaining ground because you're not going to be able to do quite as much of the denial stuff that you can with maybe some other summoning masters. I guess the only real exception there would be like Students of Viscera, just because they're so fast. You could reliably use them to like deny stuff, you know, later on in the turn. But I can see leaving him. Probably not in the bench, but you know, if you're really strapped for space, he might not make the cut.
Yeah. If I don't have room, the other thing that's really big is like that. You know, I'll just be bringing the best parts of the keyword, right? So if I don't take him, I don't have to take his 4 summonable models. Well, his quite frankly, his three of his 5 summonable models. Because I'm absolutely taking Students of Viscera and Necropunk in all cases, as we've previously covered. But man, Students of Sinew not good, undergrad's not good. They're summon only. They're not
Yep.
hireable.
Yep. Alrighty. So we're going to move on to the next keyword on my list, which is going to be kin. I would say that Ophelia 1 and Ophelia 2 are absolutely required. They're both great. I would say that if I had to play the crew into a less than ideal pool, then Ophelia 2 is the one that gets chosen all the time. Ophelia 1 does have some relatively narrow strengths, but those strengths are really, 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 really high. So I'm always going to take both of them. Again, I did take packing space into consideration. They're both very small models, and it's probably not going to be difficult to find space for them, especially because literally everything else in the keyword is also a very small model, except for some of the raiders. So I can fit them into a very, very small space. And they're not very heavy, so it's easy to magnetize them. I don't really have to worry about them getting knocked around or anything like that. So both Ophelias make it in. All 3 young LaCroix, obviously, I need, those being her totems. LaCroix Raiders, I would for sure always take one, because I think you probably almost always want to take one of them with Ophelia 2. I don't think after her adjustments you need to do like the double or triple Raider type lists. I don't even know that I would keep a second one in my bags unless I really had a lot of space. So the optional here on LaCroix Raider 2 it's like a very optional. That would probably be one of the last models that I reach for. Maris, 100% required. She's amazing in both Kin and in Infamous, which we'll see when we get down there. Rami, even though he has, been adjusted a couple of times, I do think is still strong enough to justify keeping in your bags at all times. Sometimes you just need a sniper, and even though he's not as good at it as he used to be, he's still worth having around just for the threat. Sammy is incredible, and 100% required for both keywords that she's in. Raphael is now the best, hardest hitting non-master model that we have in the keyword, and he's a legitimate threat in pretty much any game, regardless of whether it's at ranged or in melee. He also has a stat 7 terrorize against most models, which is kind of amazing for denial.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
pretty
that's
good.
really good.
Pretty good. Sly, I would say I would even consider moving Sly over to required, just because if you are trying to play Ophelia into a less than ideal game, he really does kind of solve some problems that the keyword has a difficult time doing otherwise. The only reason I'm not going to put him in required is, quite frankly, I don't have a ton of games in with him. I feel like I would probably misplay him. And then also he does take up kind of a lot of space in the bag. His model is relatively large, so he's not going to quite make it into the requireds, but I'm considering it. I already talked about the Raiders. Pair, I'm going to put in optional, mostly because the job that I used to have him for was blow it to hell. Aside from that, he's often a liability because he's very, very easy for opponents to abuse. You can like sneak in some cheeky attacks for like a gazillion damage on an opponent. But that's like the rarest of rare situations when it's actually going to work. More often than not, what happens is I end up having to play kind of cagey with him, or stick him way out on a flank so that he doesn't blow up all over my models. And he gets like one good blow it to hell off in the game, and then he just kind of dies. The only thing that I'm just going to move him, because I'm going to move him over to preferred, which may seem like a weird pick. It is Bayou is a faction that's excellent at marker removal, and now we have 2 blow it to hell models with him and Judd and Honey. The issue, I initially said that I would take Judd and Honey over him every time. In reality, the more that I think about it, because Judd and Honey have such a low movement, and your opponent isn't at all disincentivized for getting close to them, they can still shoot them to death just as easily as Pair almost. I would say it's tougher to really fully utilize the blow it to hell because their movement's so low. And at least Pair has the benefit of opponents not really wanting to get close to him in melee to kill him. So I'm going to actually move him up to preferred. And poor Francois. He's bench. Sorry, dude. I've tried making you work so many times. Francois stinks. I don't know who loves Francois out there, if they're going to get mad at me for saying this for the umpteenth time, but yeah, he does a job that the crew doesn't need doing, and he's horribly resource inefficient, and yeah, he doesn't make it in, and it's a real bummer because he's one of my favorite models in the keyword, and it's the keyword that I started the game with. Can't see taking him.
Oh no.
Oh no. So,
Well,
what do you think, Brandon? That all sound pretty good?
that all sounds great. Yeah, I mean, I definitely Sly Six Shots compared to Bayou is like the biggest model that you can hire in Bayou. Maybe
He's
outside of
right.
Mod 2.
He's up there. There's some pretty big ones, but yeah, he's up there.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. Especially where Bayou, like almost every single model is just tiny, right?
Yeah.
You could really, like, if you depending on what your magnet storage is, you could get real in there and bring
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the faction.
Yeah. When I play Ophelia without Sly in it, especially if I'm only using the smallest of the 3 raiders, people look at it and they're like, "Your crew is tiny. Like what?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could fit the whole crew in an Altoids box.
Probably. Yeah.
And I think they're Ferris, so you can be magnet stored. It might work.
There you go.
Wild stuff.
Wild stuff. Brandon, tell us about Returned.
Oh, I will. I think that both Castor 1 and Castor 2 have legs. I have no reps on Castor 1. It is a very different playstyle. And so Castor 2 is definitely my required, but Castor 1 is my preferred. I'm hoping really that I get a couple reps in and can play some games. Obviously, I have to bring Marathene. Atharak and Gwyll are both exceptionally strong. I would absolutely 100% bring them both in every game. Barbaros, on the other hand, is a little bit less strong, perhaps. And I think that he definitely has his place, but I don't know that he's an auto include. But I would like to bring him if there's space. Although I will say, out of all of the models that in the preferred category, he's probably the first one I cut. Where there's no world in my mind in any capacity that I'm not bringing both Cavern Nephilims. That's happening in 100% of cases. And then I think Urn Bearers we're probably bringing at least one, certainly. It's likely that I'll end up probably bringing both Urn Bearers, but I have one in preferred, one in optional, because I don't think I will need both, but I definitely will like to bring one. I would like to bring 2 of the Blood Vessels for sure. I don't even think I need the third one. I just can't imagine ever running it, even if there's public demonstration in the pool. I just don't think that we're gonna do that. Plus, like I could there are 5 points, right? But for public demonstration, I get 2 Blood Vessels and like Atharak, or not Atharak, but like some a Cavern Nephilim, some 8-point model. I don't know. I don't have this crew's models all memorized cost wise, but certainly, yeah, we could do Gwyll, we could do White Eyes, we could do a lot of things. Urn Bearer maybe, but and then we have White Eyes, who I'm just not the biggest fan of. You know, if there's room, I will definitely bring him. Also, I have to paint him. The box just came out. I got it at Gen Con. It's built and primed, but I just don't know if there'll be time to really go over him. And it's not something that I'm going to put an extreme amount of focus on. I have the Unseelie engine built and painted. I am not going to play it. Also,
Yeah.
It's massive. It is a very large model. Not to Castor is quite big by himself, but I use a magnet storage solution that is made out of some metal riveted to freezer storage bins, basically, that fit in my Malifaux battle foam bag, because I did this before the Malifaux sized magnet racks were available. And quite frankly, it was an eighth the cost, and I would encourage other people to do that. We're thinking about doing a video on the Danger Planet about my my build solution, because I use it. It's what I use. It's what Doug uses. It's what Adam uses. Brendan uses it. Sam uses it to an extent. So it's a cool system that I invented. But vertical space isn't as big a concern, I think, in my storage situation. Nonetheless, Unseelie engine, no.
Yeah. I pulled up the Unseelie engine on the Crew Builder app just so folks could kind of look it over. There's a whole heck of a lot of rules on this thing. I without going through it, I'd be interested to hear why you think it is a bench model. Are you talking like bench model all the time, or just in this situation where you're trying to build for a tournament?
I think all the time, quite frankly. Like, okay, so it's hard to kill. Cool. That's the end of the things that I care about on the front of the card. No, like, I mean, if like I get, so the life thing is cool. So he has an ability called Icon of Life, where when one of your friendly models, when if it would heal, it can pass the healing off to other people, but it doesn't have regen. Its bonus actions are wonky. It can keep them up, and that's cool, but the ores are very small. And unless I'm gonna get it in somehow with its movement 4, I just don't see that being super important.
Yeah, and
It
it's
has
one
a
where
good.
like you'd kind of have to activate it early, but then like the longer you wait to activate it, the less effective the bonus actions are. And
Mhm.
during its activation, I mean, there's some stuff that it can do, but I just don't really seeing it. Like I can't foresee activating this thing like second in like turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. And then by the time you get to the point that you can actually activate it, most of your opponent's big bruisers have already gone. So like the hidden from the outside world isn't going to be as effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like it's defense 5. It has 7 health. It has to take 2 damage a turn to 2 irreducible damage a turn to keep its second bonus action up from turn 1. And then like it just like what does it actually do? I run it into the middle of my opponent's crew to die for 8 points. For 8 points, I could just not do that. It has an okay attack, but like it's okay. It's a 2/4/6.
Yeah.
That's a 1-inch stat 5.
Yeah, it doesn't
If this
strike me as a model that you would see a 1-inch engage attack on. Also,
if
Atlas
this were
Strike being a 1-inch engage sounds weird too.
it's not good. It doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. If this were literally every single point on this card were exactly the same except for its cost, and its cost were 5 soulstones, I probably still wouldn't hire it.
Wow.
I think 4 is the breaking point. I think that's where I'd be like, okay, I'll try this.
I think that's a little crazy, but
I what is he gonna do? He's size 4, so everyone on the entire board can see him always.
yeah.
This model's just gonna die.
Yeah,
I just
for real.
don't.
I think
It
part of
doesn't
that
do anything,
might
and it
also
does die.
be related to the fact that you have most of your experience with Castor 2, who tends to like be super divey and like in your opponent's face. Like
Yeah.
the Unseelie engine might have a bigger place in a Castor 1 game,
I'm
but
sure
that's
that
just
it
me
does.
guessing.
I'm sure that it does.
Yeah, yeah,
But
cool.
no, we'll see. I'll try it. I'll try it one day. But I just like this is one of the very few instances where I don't feel that I'm not getting the card. I just feel that having read the card, I have no desire to play this model ever.
All right, so we'll turn it back over to me. And as anybody who's watching the video can see, I have preemptively pulled up the Wrestler's card because I have feelings about the Wrestler. But that said, we're going to talk about Zip and the infamous keyword. So Zip 1 is my default Zip. Zip 2 I have in my preferreds, not because I don't think he's good, but because I haven't even played a single game with him. I think once I get some games in, he does probably fit right in with Zip 1 in the required section, because there's a couple of specific matchups that he helps out in enormously. Gets around some of the things that Zip 1 really has a tough time with. Yeah, I would say, I'm just going to preemptively actually move him over to required, just because I feel like as long as I'm generally comfortable with the way the model works, I'm gonna be okay playing him if I end up in a very bad matchup for Zip 1. So moving him over to required. Earl, of course, the totem, got to have him. We've got Flying Piglet. I think you always need to have one, because there's sometimes that's just what you can fit into the crew. They're cheap, like extremely cheap. They're not overwhelmingly good models, but they can score points and they don't cost that much to bring. I'm not the type of person that's going to hire like the Flying Pig Brigade and bring like all 3 of them. But one I think you always have to have. Maris is an auto, just like she is with Kin, because she's amazing. Bowfishbacher is a model that I've had mixed success with, but I feel like there's enough matchups that he is extremely good in. And if you end up getting paired onto a table where there's like just hazardous terrain somewhere around the middle, he can be incredibly abusive for your opponent to have to deal with. And you always take one Iron Skeeter. Sometimes you're going to take two Iron Skeeters. There are a couple of weirdo games where there's a lot of like blocking stuff and you really need to be very mobile around it that I can see taking a second one. I don't think I would ever take three. Like not ever. And plus, they're easily some of the most difficult to transport models in the entire faction. If you're doing like foam, they take up like almost a quarter of the space in a foam tray, and you need to have like a really deep one. It's rough, just for those two of them. So yeah, I think you always have to probably, I'd always consider taking, you know what? I think just for storage space concerns, I'm going to move Iron Skeeter 2 over to the optionals, just because I don't think there are enough games that I really seriously need to consider having two. And the storage considerations are an issue.
Yeah, they're massive.
Yeah, they're massive.
Massive, absurdly fragile models.
Yeah. Johann, I like Johann a lot more than a lot of other people do. I always seem to get good mileage out of him in the rare few games that I actually play him. And since I use the Johanna model, very small, frankly, if they're considering redoing any alt models, I think Johanna would be a great one because it's little teeny and is not indicative of the hitting power that model has. So I still fit it in because, again, it doesn't take up that much space. Same thing with Bert. Bert, again, I have somewhat mixed success with, but especially in a game, like if you're not going to be able to fit a second Iron Skeeter, Bert can kind of fill the same role in terms of like flanking, scheming, that kind of thing in a much smaller physical package. Gracie used to be an auto for me. I used her a lot. I just feel like the last couple of games that I've played her, she's really been a liability with the low wound count and the 0-inch engage. It just always seems to cause problems these days because there's so many things in the game that move around your models. There's a lot more big engagement ranges out there. And she can be tough to move around the table because she's a 50 mil with a move 4. Granted, she has Reckless, she has Ride With Me, but it can really cause problems. So Gracie, I'm still going to keep her in preferred because there are enough games that I can see getting good mileage out of her. But it's on the low end of preferred. She's almost optional for me at this point. First Mate and Mancha Roja are both unbelievably good models. I have been pretty vocal about my concerns about the First Mate because it is a very resource intensive model to use. You need a lot of stones, you need a lot of cards, but I think the ability for it to be, it's this nice little spot where it's defensive enough to be annoying to deal with, fast enough that it can score points reliably, and with enough resources can hit hard enough that it can be a legitimate threat to enough models that I still have to keep it in required. And I consider both of them to be important tech pieces that I would pack in my bags regardless of what I was actually going to be taking. The only other stuff I have here are the smugglers. I don't really rate them very highly. Some people like them more than I do. I've never really felt like I've missed not having them handy. I'm going to say one's going to be in the optionals just because, but I would never bring two of them with me. And then Wrestlers. All three Wrestlers go to the bench. Sorry, guys. Wrestlers suck.
Aww.
They have... God. Their stats are terrible. Hard to wound is fine, but like a lot, if they're fighting against a min 3, like they're still going to get 2-shot. Maybe if they had hard to kill 2, like maybe. Their squeal's not built in. Not that I expect a model, a little model like this to have built-in squeal, but like that might help a little bit too. Their toss in the mud is a good ability, but it doesn't have like any triggers on it. Maybe if they had the same trigger that Mancha does, which I would still need to have a high mask in hand to use because I can't stone for it. Like maybe, but their bonus action stinks. Their attack is a 0 engage and it's not good. Like, it just, forget it. Sorry, guys. You don't come with me until they get eroded. Weird. Buff Rasslers, please.
Oh my gosh.
And they're great models. It makes me sad that I can't justify putting them on the table.
They're really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving on, you have Dougie,
Oh my
Mr.
gosh.
McMorning.
Mr. McMorning. What a guy.
What a guy.
So, again, we're sort of at this interesting point, which I think actually, you know what? Now that we're talking about it, I think we're gonna do a quick hot swap. So I have McMorning 2 as required. I feel very strongly that McMorning 2 is the master that I would play if I were running a McMorning crew in almost all circumstances. But I am going to take McMorning 1 and I'm going to bump him over to preferred, and I'm also going to make him this lovely violet color. I think that McMorning 1 is not necessarily as a master who I want to be leading the keyword, just for realistically for many reasons. But McMorning 1 is a stat 7 uh, auto basically auto Billidan injured precise master, which as a second master, if you're playing second masters, is he can kill anything easily. And it's not close. So I think that McMorning 1 is, even though not who I probably would end up having be leading the crew if I'm taking McMorning, I think that having McMorning 1 available as a second master in case you ever plan on doing that is a huge deal. Obviously, we're taking the Zombie Chihuahua. That's not up for debate. He's the totem. You get him for free. Um, Sebastian, I think I'm probably taking in most cases. So definitely bringing him along. Corpse Curator, same deal. The Corpse Curator is an absurdly versatile model that does a number of things really well. Definitely bringing him. The Rafkin, no, I I don't know what that model does. I've never read the card. No, that's not true. I have, but like he just like in a circumstance where I have like, Rafkin is the type of model that I'm gonna seriously consider taking a second master before I hire him. I just don't see the point. He just doesn't seem cost worth enough for me. Um, the Rogue Necromancy is the primary beater of the crew. Especially in McMorning 2, I think we'll find that is the primary. I'm going to put stuff into him. I'm going to eat him down the board. He's going to eat people. The nurse is I'm bringing all three nurses. I don't know now all three nurses. You might ask. That's an interesting question because I'm pretty sure nurses are minion too. You might say, but I say all three nurses because in addition to the two normal nurses, I also have the puppet nurse, which I also am bringing because I'm obsessed with puppet models. Neverborn is my primary faction at heart, even though I haven't played them in a while, and I'm never going to not bring the puppet nurse. So I'm bringing all three nurses, which is a bit weird. Um, we also have the Canine Remains, which I'm probably going to bring one or two. They're very small models, so if there's even a space for a 30 mil, they're just going in there. And I'm not going to hire them really. They're just in preferred because Sebastian can summon them pretty easily. Canine Remains 3 is probably not coming unless I just have space, in which case might as well. And Little Gassers I think are in I likely will bring one or two. I think one of them is probably where I'm going to go, but they're just so small. They don't take up much space at all. So I likely will bring at least one for sure. Arguably, I guess I could have put one in required. They're really good for enabling the poison engine because they have the ability to pulse out poison at the end of their activation. And they're like okay schemers, even though if you look at them with a mean glare, they'll explode. Um, uh, I think we're still going to take at least one, probably two, and maybe three. I don't really see a point in taking three, quite frankly, though. So I think I'm comfortable with them being on the bench. Like I'm never going to hire a third one.
Yeah.
Can't summon them. Never going to hire it.
Mm-hmm.
With McMorning, you have to bring flesh constructs. He summons them. So I don't really foresee in McMorning 2 ever having a position where I'm going to have both more than two flash constructs. There are three available. I will probably bring two. If there's room, I'll bring the third one. The Kentoroi are certainly models that I can confirm. They are for sure models. I think that I likely am going to not end up bringing more than one, if at all. And if I bring one, it will be optional. It'll be like
Mhm.
the very last thing I pick, if there's space. And they're big. They're big. They're big models. They have big. They're very tall. They got big stabby spears, and they're just not very strong. I'm not bringing guild autopsies. I'm just gonna leave them at home. I just don't see a point. Um, with McMorning in particular, there's always also the possibility, which we'll cover when I go over the Revenant keyword in a bit, that I bring um, uh, some of the a grave digger perhaps, or perhaps out of keyword Riva's restless spirit is a thing that people do sometimes. Um, but I'm just and maybe even mindless zombies or enslaved spirits. I think mindless zombies is a general rule for rezzers or something that you just really always have to have like 2 or 3 of.
Mhm.
I likely will just bring all 5 because they're very small, but you do really need to have them. Almost every crew has some way to do something to them,
Mhm.
whether it's summon them or make them happen or turn enemies into them. Um, or sometimes you're just like, well, I want to pay for a corpse marker. I have 8 soul stones. I could prefer to have 6 soul stones and a corpse marker. Let's go. So that's also a consideration
Cool.
with particularly with McMorning.
Yeah, I can dig it. The kind of interesting piece with McMorning 1. So do you think, and you may have covered this and I just missed it, but do you think that McMorning 1 is important enough as a tech piece that you would consider taking him solo with nothing else in the keyword?
Very much so. Yeah,
Very much so.
I did cover it. Yeah,
We did. Okay.
I think McMorning one is just he can put anything in the ground.
Yeah.
A precise stat 7 master that automatically gives out injured basically, unless you want to pitch cards, is just unbelievably strong.
Yeah, that can solve a lot of
There's no
problems,
world.
especially. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to buy the box, right? So you have the model if you have
Mhm.
any McMorning things because McMorning one is in the core box. You just get that model if you play Rezzers, and if you don't want to buy that, you can buy any of the classic ones that are
Yep.
like $10. That's totally a thing.
And I super duper like Dr. Dufresne.
Yeah, there's
Phenomenal.
the alt sculpt female McMorning is great.
And doesn't take
There's
up much space in the bag. How about that?
yeah, very much
Yeah,
so.
there you go.
Single model,
Cool.
and just as a second master, oh boy.
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. I didn't even look. I should have checked the Nova thing. Is it like singles or bands or anything, or is it just kind of GG?
I believe that Masters is nothing.
Masters is nothing. Okay.
And I think, quite frankly, that the other one is nothing as well. But
Cool. Anyway.
I might be wrong.
We don't need to check that right now. Maybe you can do it while I'm doing my next keyword, which we're gonna do right about now.
Wow.
So we have one of my one of the keywords that I have the most complicated relationship with, and that is Whizbang and Wong. So I really like Wong. I've really warmed up to the keyword as time has gone on. Wong 2 is a master that, or a model that I would potentially consider leaving home if space were a significant concern. But I really think that, Wong 2 is my default Wong, or Wong 1 rather is my default Wong. Wong 2, he's got enough tech on his card that I can definitely see taking him, especially if I end up playing into a keyword that I know is going to have a very easy time passing all the move duels that I'm going to put out with the shockwaves, or, you don't really want to see evasive models for either version of Wong, but there's enough situations where, like, I might consider taking him. Yeah, I think that the thing that Wong 2 does not quite as well is power up the crew. Wong 1 is a lot more efficient at it, but he's good enough in some situations that I would still probably take him along. I'm going to have Olivia, of course, his totem. I'm always going to have 2 stuffed piglets if I'm playing this keyword, just because there's enough models that can summon them in like the taxidermists and Sammy, that I'm always going to have at least 2. Ideally, I'm going to have 4, just because, if I take taxidermists or the pick-a-pole, I'm going to start the game with a couple of them. I'm never going to hire them. But those models actually summon them during the start phase of turn 1, I think. or after deployment, or I don't remember what the timing is. But suffice it to say, if you play a taxidermist or you play the Pigapole, you also get a stuffed piglet for free. And if I'm going to be, I'm always going to be playing Sammy. And if I'm playing a taxidermist, then there's going to be more opportunity to summon. So I'm probably fitting 4 into my bags if I'm being honest. And again, they're small and easy to pack, so no big deal there. Lightning bugs. There's enough weird games with like if I see like leave your mark in the pool, there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to try and squeeze a lightning bug in, mostly because I think they're the only model in the game that has the ability to get a built-in suit on New Horizon. So I can push enemy models out of position or push my own models into position to score. New Horizon is literally the only reason that I play them, though, and I would never in a million years consider taking 2 or certainly not 3 lightning bugs. So 1 is a preferred model, 2 and 3 go on the bench. Also, for stuffed piglets, I can't conceive of any situation that I would need to have all 6 of them in my bag. So I'm pretty comfortable saying the number 5 and 6 are going to stay home. We have, going down the required list, I do have a Bowcore. You always need 1. It's kind of like a tax for playing Whizbang. I don't think I would ever hire a second or a third one, though. So 1 Bowcore goes in the bag. Sammy is 100% required. She's incredible. 2 Swine Cursts are completely required. A lot of people are down on taxidermists. Well, there's a lot of reasons, but I feel like, especially into certain matchups, particularly Rezzers, they're actually really good. Just being able to like turn my opponent's corpse markers that they need for resources into stuffed piglets that can then blow up in their face is pretty good.
That's very rude.
It is very rude. There are some Rezzer matches where there's so many corpses on the table that I even consider taking both taxidermists. Those are pretty rare, but I think that there's enough of them that I would actually move the second taxidermist into the optional slot from the Never. I used to play 2 taxidermists all the time before Swine Cursts were good, but now Swine Cursts are really good, so they kind of steal a little bit of the taxidermist's thunder. Alphonse is stupendous and easily one of the faction all-stars, so he's a model that even if I weren't taking Whizbang is going to make it into my bag because he's got a couple of very specific and important uses outside of the keyword, specifically being able to pick up destructible terrain and having toss and a min 3 attack that you can get sweeping strikes on, which is pretty good. Dabblers, I have tried dabbling in dabblers, and they have never done enough to prove to me that they're worth their points. I might take 1 if I could find space in my bags. I actually don't even own any of them yet because I haven't bought the box that they come in.
If you'd like, Jesse, I'm happy to throw a dabbler in my box.
That would be delightful, just in case. But yes, I don't think that I would, reasonably speaking, take them. The Pigapole is cheeky, and there's some kind of goofy niche stuff that you can do with it. It's not a small model, and I don't feel like it's useful enough to justify guaranteeing I have in my bags. So I'm even going to go so far as to put it in the optional slot. If I have space, great. If not, I don't feel too bad leaving it home. Backup assistant is cute. It does some interesting stuff. It's one of those models that you can use to kind of plug those last couple of stones into your crew. I used to use it a lot more, just because it was a cheap model that could do some kind of cheeky fun stuff. The problem is that it used to be that Wong in general was a master that could function without really needing that many stones. You used to be able to go into a Wong game with like 3 or even 2 stones and feel fine because Wong himself really didn't need them for almost anything. Now, if I'm playing Wong 1, who's my preferred version, you use a stone almost every activation. Sometimes you use 2 because there's a couple of really critical suits that you need to make sure you get. And frequently you're activating with him early for a variety of reasons. If I'm playing Wong 2 because he has Siphon Power, I do feel like the backup assistant has more play. I have an easier time fitting him in. I would say I'm actually going to move him over to the preferred, just because I do probably want to have him available if I'm playing Wong 2. But I don't think I'd ever play him with Wong 1. I just don't have the points for it. Fluffernutter is also going to be in my preferreds, mostly because he enables you to do some goofy order of activation stuff with Wong that is otherwise a little bit trickier to do. He lets you do stuff like basically give your whole crew fast at the top of turn 1, and then also make sure that they all get fast at the end of turn 1. That way they go into turn 2 with fast. And he's fast enough that he can score some points afterwards. He can put out unresisted damage, which is always great. So yeah, Fluff is going to be in my preferreds, and that covers the rest of the keyword. So there you go. Brandon, what do you got next?
Wild stuff. So we have Revenant. This is a very spread out one.
Yeah.
So we have Reva 2. So again, Reva's sort of a bit of a polarizing master. I think that Reva 1 definitely has legs. I think that this is more than anything else just it's a very different playstyle, and I am completely unacquainted with it. So I won't be bringing Reva 1 unless I just have a bunch of empty space, and I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that.
So I'll be playing exclusively Reva 2, which means I will have both Corpse Candles. They come for free. We have both Vincent St. Clair and the Restless Spirit, who I will be bringing, obviously. With them, Vincent's an amazing henchman, and he's actually quite good in the very, very... not very narrow, but he's quite good as an out-of-keyword hire for a number of reasons. As a henchman, he can stone for the exorcism trigger, which is a huge deal sometimes, and it's on a 10-inch crossbow that's stat 6, which is just real strong. He can also pulse out shielded, and those two things alone, I think, make him a very viable hire. Out of keyword, he's hard to put down. He does stuff. He's stat defense 6, willpower 7. He's a bit expensive, but he's a lot of lad.
Yeah, I think that just having the exorcism is enough to make sure that you always want to have him available.
Yeah, he is like in the like, certainly if he's not in the trifecta of Reser models, out of keyword Reser hires, he's like slot number 4 waiting for Manos to finally croak.
He's like the techiest of the tech, but when you need him, you really need him.
Yeah. And then we also have the Restless Spirit, who fills a very similar deal. So the Restless Spirit is quite easy to kill, but he's 4 points and he has Grave Robber, which is on Suitless 5, drops a corpse marker. And there are, for 5 points out of keyword, he is a guy that you could, just the additional ability to drop corpse markers is a thing that some crews really need. He doesn't really do anything else aside from that. Terrorize is okay, but his is stat 4, which is bad. But for 5 points, he sometimes is a cheap way to drop multiple corpse markers throughout the course of a game. Of course, if you just need one, you won't take him because you'll just take a zombie for 2. In my preferred column as well, we have One Udo. I really like One Udo, but I just think that he's not quite as strong in this gaining grounds. So I will take him for sure if I have a room, which I should. And then I have a couple models in the optional category. So Grave Golem is a really interesting versatile model for Reva and her crew, particularly because Reva is so insistent on corpse markers. The Grave Golem is effectively unkillable. It's just really strong, Demise Immortal Soul is one of the very few demise abilities that aren't once per turn. So every time the Grave Golem dies, it does not matter. He heals 4 and is buried, and all you have to do to unearth him is come in with a corpse marker. And since Reva gets a free corpse marker for the cost of summoning her totems every turn, you effectively can't really not be able to, like, you shouldn't, unless they've tabled you, you should be able to get him back as much as you want, which is really interesting for a number of schemes, because if you activate him as your last activation on the final turn, they can't kill him, which sometimes is enough to, get a cheeky hidden martyrs or do something cool with that, Deacon Hillcrest, I just don't like. I like him a lot in Reva. In Karis.
Yeah.
I think he does some good work there, but I'm just less of a fan. in Reva.
Yeah, I just don't really feel like he does anything that the crew really needs, and he's kind of slow, and he just kind of dies real easy. Which
The thing that makes him have his deal is entirely like the ability to put a bunch of burning on him, which Karis can do. Reva can't, right?
Right.
And so it's just not as good. We have the Draugr. They're amazing. I really like the Draugr. They're great models. They're really strong. There's no world that I'm not going to be taking both of them with me, even though they're kind of big. There are various different ways that you can build a Reva crew for sure. One of them is to have two Draugr yeeting themselves up the board and just murder things. They have the Blaze of Glory stuff. There's some Rube Goldberg nonsense you can do to basically give them focus plus flips 2/4/5s for days. So I'm taking both of those. The Shield Bearers, I think, are instrumental to every single Reva crew.
Yeah.
I'm definitely taking two. If I can fit a third, I will. But we have the first two in required, the third one in optional. We have the shared Red Chapel Reva model, the Mourners. They're okay. I think that they have what's the ability called? Recently attended funeral or new burial or something like that. Recent funeral, where they just get to drop a corpse marker at the start of the game, which is cool. But I just don't think I want them for any other ability. And they cost 6 points. For 6 points, I will literally just take a Gravedigger. But I figure I'll stick one in because they're pretty small models. And I actually should fix this because I probably shouldn't bring a third one because you can only have two.
And like they bring some tech more to the Red Chapel keyword than this one.
I mean, they're for 6 stone models. I mean, I will say they have 7 health, and they're kind of hard to put down, right? It's weird to me that they're not incorporeal because yes, they are.
Yeah, tell me about it.
But they're like disguised and hard to wound, and enemy models that are next to them get negative twist to willpower duels. Against other models, so not them, but it's fine.
And Weeping Widow, you're not going to see Weeping Widow used that much in the Revenant keyword because I don't think you have any terrifying models, right?
No. Not really.
But it's situationally important in the Seamus crew. Not a make or break, but it's just an extra little help.
Yeah.
There.
Yep. Yeah. Another level of the bubble to protect your dudes. But we have the best minion in her keyword, the Lampads. Like, they're very strong.
Yeah.
More importantly than them being very strong, Reva 2 can summon them. I think Reva 1 also summons them. And so. Yeah. And so we have all three
nice
of the Lampads in various places.
2, maybe 3. Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, 3 I'll take if I have space, but I'm never going to summon 3 of them. I'm never going to have 3 of them on the board with Reva. And if I have, I've already won the game, and whatever. I'll do better things with the AP.
Yeah.
And then we have Gravediggers in the same space, which we talked about. Gravediggers are super good for the Reva crew. They let you drop a corpse marker, and they get an absurd amount of free movement in Reva's crew. Every time Reva activates, or one of the corpse candles activates, you will effectively get a free push with them. Right? So we're definitely taking one, but they're big models, and they have big, awkward, like, sticks that come up and lantern things, and I have only one of them is painted, so I'm gonna leave one home unless I manage to paint it, and that's Reva. That's what we got.
Yeah, the Reva 1 being in the bench is definitely interesting. I can see it because I don't really think that there are too many matchups that Reva 2 just like has a really hard time dealing with, and the stuff that Reva 1 does you can already kind of do with some of your other keywords. Plus, not a huge model, but like a bigger one, especially if you're using the alt, which is a freaking phenomenal model, by the way.
Yeah.
Not great to transport though. So I gotta ask you a question about something with the Revenant keyword before we move on. Have you ever tried doing the cheeky Grave Golem out of keyword Gwill thing that our buddy Jake Martin came up with? Because it's so corny and like it'll work once on somebody.
What is this Gwill stuff?
So basically, you can use Gwill to just kill the Grave Golem turn 1.
Okay.
with essence transfer, I think is what it's called, where you take 4 health off of it and put it on something else. And you just like bonsai kamikaze rather, what do you call it? Corpse candle up the field to make a corpse marker like really close to your opponent's crew, and then you just get like a unactivated grave golem that unburies wherever you put that corpse marker to go smash stuff. And it also gives you basically an infinite health pool that you can just siphon wounds off of to heal your other models with Quill.
Okay, all right.
It's pretty
I
cute.
see that. That's interesting. I think the big problem is you'd have to hit it for 6 first, and it's hard to wound. That's the big trick, right? Because the Grave Golem starts at 10, and I think Essence Transfer is capped at 4, unless I'm crazy.
I think it's 4, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a look. We'll use this handy crew builder app so that we can go off topic and talk about weird tangential goofy combos.
Yeah. It is capped at 4.
You basically just have to hit it. You can essence transfer twice if you want to. You can just so you hit it with anything
punch
else.
it with something as you're going up. Do like charge into it with a shield bearer, slam it a little bit out of the way.
Right. It's cute. I didn't say it was good, but
I don't know if it's 19 points cute.
Well, probably not.
Right. That's sort of the
Like I said, I didn't say it was good.
Very interesting though.
But yeah, I think the thing that he actually used it for the most was he would use it near like kind of being in the mix and just use it as essentially an infinite pool to just essence transfer 4 wounds off of basically every turn, and
twice a turn heal some combination of models for 8.
Right. It's cute. Anyway, so moving on to my angler, we're nearing the end. We're getting there. So this one's going to be pretty quick because I don't have a ridiculous amount of experience with the keyword, and also most of the models in the keyword are good enough that I would just take almost everything. Clampets 1 and 2 are both awesome. They serve different roles, and I think they are definitely worth having. One thing I will make mention of right off the top is if I were seriously limited on storage space, angler is the keyword that I would leave at home because there's a lot of big models here, like a lot of them. Anyway, both versions of the Clampets, Bruce, of course. I'm always going to take 1 Skulker skin just because I feel like putting up like the gigantic super concealment aura on most of your crew is worth it. I do not ever see myself taking 2 of them though. So 1 Skulker always comes in, 2 and 3 always stay home. 1 Buckaroo is always in just because they do Siluridy kind of stuff, but I don't feel like they do it quite as well as Silurids in most situations. And unless I feel like doing like the triple Buckaroo stomping all over your crew, like rodeo style thing, I'm not going to take number 2 and almost certainly not going to take number 3. But I'm still going to put them in, even go down to like the optionals, just because it is kind of fun. And it's one of those things that, again, if I'm having a tough couple of rounds and I want to do like the triple Buckaroo list, then why the hell not, right? Judd and Honey is a for sure, and I consider Judd and Honey to be like probably our premier blow it to hell model, even given the situation, the concerns that I had with him when I talked about pair. I think you always want to have it in your bag, and especially if you get paired into a keyword where the totem is very, very important. Judd and Honey is always a consideration because you have the option, of just potentially sniping it off the table.
That guy's ridiculous.
It's really
my
good.
God.
Yeah. I'm always going to take a Hermit, and it's the only take the hit model in Bayou. It's also the only extended reach model in Bayou. So I think you always have to have one in your bag regardless of what you're playing. Cervantes and Anti-Mel are both fantastic. I would not consider either of them to be critical tech picks that I'm going to take into other crews. I know people thought Anti-Mel was when she first came out. I just don't really feel like she's like the new Francois. And I don't feel like she has enough use out of keyword to justify taking her unless I really, really, really feel like I need her. Bog, on the other hand, is incredible and is going to see a lot of out of keyword play. He's also a fucking gigantic model.
Yeah,
It's
he might actually just be the largest Bayou model. Period.
I'm
I don't
pretty
know
sure
that
he
that's
is.
true, but
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
God.
he is.
Physically, he is more plastic than the emissary. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, it's gigantic. So yeah, I mean the second hermit, I don't think I would really need to play two of them very often. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole keyword. I feel good with that one. You've played against Angler at least a couple of times, right?
Yeah, many times now.
Many times now.
It is a thing.
Yeah. Do you agree
sure.
with my tiering of their models?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Like Boggs Nuts, he's going to be super out of keywordy forever. There's no world that's not going to happen. Guys just nuts.
Yeah.
And I think you definitely are keeping a Buckaroo for sure. I think in most cases you're probably taking two if you're taking them at all, but one of Skulker definitely, Judd and Honey definitely, a Hermit definitely. I think if anything that I disagree with, I think that Hermit 2 might be up higher.
Fair enough.
Because the cases where they're good, they're great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they help each other because they're.
You convinced me. So
yeah.
Let's move on to.
But yeah, Cervantes and Anti-Mel, I don't think you'll always take Anti-Mel for sure, but you absolutely always want to have access to her.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah. So that's Angler. Let's go ahead and move on to Red Chapel. Talk about a spread out keyword. It's like going down a slide.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I didn't. Well, it's fine. So okay. So Seamus 1 and Seamus 2. I think both are likely. More than anything else, I think I'm taking Seamus 1, and quite frankly, it's also probable that I'll have Seamus 1 be. We'll highlight him in the violet color.
So very important question, Brandon. Do you use Seamus, Misfeasance, or Puppet Seamus?
Puppet Seamus.
Puppet Seamus.
What kind of question is that? Obviously, we're doing Puppet Seamus.
Puppet Seamus it is.
I don't even know if normal Seamus is primed. I think he's not, actually. I think Puppet Seamus is painted and normal Seamus is primed, so at me. Definitely Seamus and Copycat Killer. That's where we go. It's great. I will say if I were going to use normal Seamus, I would use Puppet Seamus as the Copycat Killer.
I can see that.
I don't think anyone would be too mad. I think people would be less mad
Misfeasance
about that
with Puppet Seamus for Copycat. That makes sense. I like it.
I like what Doug did, where he has Misfeasance with as his proxy for Seamus too, because he got a little knife and hid it in a bouquet that he put in her other hand, which is pretty cool. We have the White Rabbit Co., which I'm infinitely sad about the fact that the White Rabbit from the Rabbit and Hare box isn't also an acceptable official bit for proxy for the White Rabbit Co. I think it should be alt that and also alt the Damned, or not the Damned, the Blessed of December. Because let's be real, he's a White Rabbit. He has a hat. It's an amazing top hat. I just don't. Come on, guys.
Yeah, I own the box that has the White Rabbit Co. in it. And it makes me wonder if I'd have to see how the models go together, but if there's a way that you could put together the bench and not have the other models, and then also fit the Pasha hair on the same base. Probably.
I don't think so. Model. The hair's very large and it's on a 40 mil.
Big.
It overlapped quite a bit. Maybe though.
I'll tell you what, Brandon. In any of my events, if you choose to use the Pasha hair as your White Rabbit Co., I'm going to let you do it.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely going to take you up on that because that's my goal. He's all glittery and snazzy and amazing. White Rabbit Co. check for sure. Bet Noir, can't say enough. Quite frankly, she might even be a out of keyword pick. There's just so many really good models in Rezzers that you can do that with. As far as the minions in Seamus are concerned, Rotten Bell, I think I'm almost certainly going to take. It might actually just be 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to make that change now instead of 1 and 2 and then 3. I don't think I'm ever going to take 3 of that model.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, they're good, but I don't think
they're good. But I don't think they're that good.
Yeah.
Dead Doxy, I think we're going to put 1 and 2 of in the box on the preferred side. I would like to take them, and then 3. Dead Dandy, I don't feel as strong about. I think if I have room for them, I'll take 1 and 2, and then 3's going in the box. And I think both Mourners are likely going in the box if I have room.
Yeah. I'm going to take this moment to soapbox for just a moment. Weird please, 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 and I don't want to poop on Brandon or any other Reser players' parade, can we please fix Bet Noir and make it so that you, read as written, cannot use Rise again when she's not buried, because it's real stupid. That's it. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I think that yeah. I don't know. That's what they did. I mean, she's so bloody. You know, it makes sense that she's red.
Yeah, sure.
I guess. I don't know. I have the red one, the translucent one.
Yeah.
That's the one that I use, so I didn't have to paint it.
Mm-hmm.
Wild stuff.
I definitely
then,
agree with this tiering.
Yeah.
Did you go? I think we went through all the models, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
it. Everything.
Yeah, the only thing I would
keywords
say
not-
is
not
I
pretty
would
much.
consider one Doxy to be required, because I think they're really good. But you've played Seamus a lot more than I've played against Seamus, so
I don't know that that's true, quite frankly.
No?
No,
All right.
I've only played a couple games.
fair enough.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to make that change.
All right,
I think likely
I
I
can dig
probably
that.
was the preferred. I think I have room for all of my required and preferred regardless. So
Cool.
cool. But yeah, I'll make that change for sure.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
We've got my last keyword before we get into versatiles and out of keywords, and we're doing pretty good on time. So how about that? I thought we were going to run way over. We are going to talk a little bit about Zoraida, the master that I love to death and really should be playing a lot more than I have. She's just the bestest. And I do not own the Rotten Harvest version, and I need to rectify that because I know.
I have them at the store. I will
know,
get them for
I know
you.
that. So anyway, Zoraida. Zoraida's amazing in Bayou. So anybody who says, oh, she's better in Neverborn, it doesn't matter. She's still amazing in Bayou. So Zoraida 1 and 2, I put right on par with each other. They both do stuff that like nothing else in the game really does. Zoraida 2 can also be a very strong out of keyword pick a la McMorning 1, because there are some keywords out there that if you screw up their activation order on turn 1, just get totally hamstrung. If you know when to utilize Zoraida 2 as an out of keyword, and exactly what point in the turn you need to actually use her so that you can use Seal Fate on something, it can like totally derail somebody's game. But yeah, Zoraida 1, Zoraida 2, both amazing. I would always take them. Zoraida 1 can also be a phenomenal out of keyword hire. I mean, she's been like the staple second master basically since the game came out, and nothing's really changed with that. She's just as good as she always used to be. Voodoo Doll, of course, we have to take. I really, really like Will-O-the-Wisps. I almost always take one Will-O-the-Wisp, especially with Zoraida 1, just because the interplay between that and the Voodoo Doll. Probably less important as an out of key or as a staple model in Zoraida 2, but still justify taking one of them in the bag always. I don't know that I would ever really hire 2 unless I really felt like the extra lures were going to make a big difference, and there's no way I would take 3. That's crazy talk. Crazy talk. Down to Waldgeists. I actually don't own any Waldgeists because I got them and then I gave them to a friend who was playing Fae, and then I just never replaced them. That said, I haven't really felt the need to bring them. If I were, I would say I'd probably keep one just because Planted Roots is good. So even though I don't actually own them, I am still going to put them into the preferred because I feel like there are a couple of games when they really might legitimately be worthwhile having. And just fitting one model in the bag is not really that big a deal. So I don't think I'd ever see myself playing 2 or 3 of them, though. So the other ones go into the bench.
They do some stuff sometimes. I mean, they have sort of a cheeky, I can punch you through a forest and place you behind me and displace models like 7 inches, 8 inches away. But like I said, with the Dabbler, I'm happy to throw one in my bag. I have many
That would
of
just
them.
be great.
Yeah,
I mean, like, we all know that Planted Roots is good. The rest of the stuff on the card, not phenomenal. I think that the cutesy use case, like you said, is like being able to attack through a forest and then hit heave and displace a model like a gazillion inches if it's a big piece of terrain. Yeah, exactly. It's, interesting to say the very least.
Yeah, arguably the worst kidnap in the game that sometimes is theoretically possible. Maybe.
Right. And when it actually goes off, it can be enormous, but trying to get it off is not great.
Well, you can't plan it. You just have to be there.
Yeah, it just happens.
It just
Somebody
has to work
stumbles
out.
into it and you happen to flip or have the high ram that you don't need for something else, and you're like, oh man, you're going to hate me for this.
Yeah.
Adsy. I still don't know how it's actually pronounced. I should probably like Google that because I'm sure it's
I think it's Adza.
Adza.
But
all right, I like Adza
I've always
better
said Adza.
because Adsy sounds silly and ads doesn't sound right. So Adza it is. Adza, I think while it is a spindly model and it's difficult to transport and it's going to break easily and what have you, I do feel like there are enough situations that it does work. I really like it. I tend to use it a lot in Zoraida 1. I just think that it's a generally pretty good model. Groot Slang, on the other hand, very, very narrow use cases, and it's freaking gigantic. So difficult to transport. I'm going to say that the Groot Slang, it's on kind of the bottom of the optionals. If I run out of space, he's the one that's getting cut first because he's gigantic, and I don't feel like he does enough to justify the amount of space in the bags. Speaking of other big models, though, the Kurgan and Bad Juju are both amazing, and I know that some people really have strong feelings about Juju and say that he's terrible. I disagree. That dude does work. Love him. And Doug Bowman, I am very sorry to say this, but none of the Gups nor the Spawn Mother ever make it into my bags under any situation. Those models suck.
I feel like that's a challenge that we, as everyone who's going to Nova, should try and sneak Spawn Mothers and Gups into Jesse's bags. And, you know, I'm not going to say that there will be a prize for whoever gets one in there first, but...
Boy, oh boy.
Also, I disagree. No, that guy's bad.
Yeah. I do like having...
No, not the Spawn Mother and Gups. I definitely don't disagree with that. I mean
Okay.
Bad Juju.
Oh, you hate Bad Juju.
Oh,
All
I
right,
hate
fair
him.
enough.
I won't play him.
We're on opposite sides of the Bad Juju train over here. So Bayou Gator, I think having one is always good just because, I mean, they're fragile, they're, you know, whatever, but like they're one of those models where if you need the Ruthless, they can be worthwhile. They're not a huge point investment. They're not gigantic models, so they're easy to fit into your bags. And there's enough use cases that I feel like having one with you is good. I don't think I would ever hire more than one, though. You take them in very specific games. If you're playing into something like a Jackdaw that you really need the Ruthless for, and then they still probably die turn 2, but like whatever, at least they do something, hopefully. One Silurid is like an always. I almost never play Zoraida without one Silurid. I have ever taken 2, and I actually consider having a Silurid in your bags to be very important for Bayou because they do something at a low point cost that like really not that much else in the faction does. And sometimes you just kind of need a Silurid. I don't think I'd ever play 3, so the third one doesn't even make it into the bag. But number 1 and number 2 probably do. McTavish, I actually have 2 entries for McTavish here. He's a very weird model. If we look down into the versatiles and out of keywords, basically, if I'm taking Zoraida and plan on using Zoraida 2, he's worth putting into my like second tier of models. If I'm not taking Zoraida, he is garbage and he stays at home. Just because I feel like the thing that holds him back chiefly is the fact that his gun is only lower stat and he doesn't really have phenomenal triggers, but I feel like her Witch's Brew on Zoraida 2 makes him worth having in the bags depending on the terrain. First Mate, we've already talked about. He's amazing. He's just as amazing in Swamp Fiend as he is in, in Infamous. And he actually has the benefit, especially with Zoraida 1, of getting 2 hands a turn that he can try and fish for the cards he needs from. So, good deal. Bocors are significantly less important in Zoraida than they are in Whizbang. I'd still want to have one handy, just because it's nice to have a healer in a pinch, and they do kind of help Juju out. Apparently I put, because that's my versatiles, so my Bayou Gator and my versatile I put in the same slot for the same reasons, and that is Swamp Fiend. So, Brandon, you've already shared some of your opinions. Is there anything else that you think I got wildly wrong as somebody who has a good bit of experience playing Zoraida?
Well, I mean, I own McTavish. I'm shocked that you have him on the list and didn't just omit him. But I guess the Bayou, I guess Zoraida 2's elixir makes him maybe a little better. Um, yeah, completely agree. One bow core maybe. Uh, Silurids also, I agree with your point. I love Silurids. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
they're super good models. They're something that really wants to kill them can, but they usually are good for taking at least one hit. Which most anti-schemers, that's sort of um, their deal is they get you like for one focus shot, and that'll be that. Kurgan's amazing, love
Yeah.
him.
Amazing.
Bad Juju I don't like. That's the only thing.
Fair enough.
That's the only hard disagree. I think I agree with everything else.
Cool.
For sure.
Yeah, when you take Juju and you use Witch's Brew on him and it brings his defense up to 4, like, whoa.
Yeah.
He's in the big leagues now.
I will say I do particularly love the one of Will o' the Wisp in Zoraida. Just for the voodoo doll shenanigans you can do with it.
Yeah, it's cheap. It's not a big investment, and like even if you don't get to actually do that, it still has a lore, which is never a bad thing. So
and they have a 2-inch melee, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing people
True
forget
story.
a lot about Will o' the Wisps.
True story. All right, moving on to your last keyword, we have tormented.
Tormented. Okay. So tormented, I think is as I may have mentioned, the keyword that I have the least plays with. Jackdaw 1 and 2. I think that Jackdaw 2 is probably the use case here for sure. But I think that that is probably where I would put them.
Mm-hmm.
I both at the sort of the same deal. I messed up with the spacing a little bit.
It's okay.
August Heart, I just as a general premise am not a big fan of.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he does some stuff, but I think he just like, he doesn't do damage really. He doesn't really do. He does a lot of duels.
Yeah, I think he just does a lot of stuff that you just don't really need with either version of Jackdaw.
Yeah, he's very much a Nelly model. I think that's reasonable, but I just don't think I just don't think that that's what we want to be doing. Lady Ligea, obviously you take her. She's your totem. Montresor is a beast.
Yeah.
His aura is ridiculous. The stagger that he puts out and then refuses to allow people to end is crazy. I'd like the tree. I have the normal. I think I have a translucent Jackdaw box if I remember correctly, but I might be on drugs about that. Stay tuned. I hope I have one because I was planning this whole bringing him on foundationally upon the idea that I have one, and if I don't have a translucent Jackdaw box, that's going to be a problem. Because then I'll have to paint the models.
Yeah.
All right.
No bueno. We'll find out.
Yeah. We'll figure out. Stay tuned. News at 11.
You just can kind of just paint them all kind of ghosty.
I'll just make them all ghosts. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
We have the guilty who are rad. I really like the guilty.
Super good.
Definitely, I think 1 and 2 of them right off the bat. 3, I think we'll put in the optional just because I don't really think I'll ever run 3, but I want the third one in case I want it.
Mm-hmm.
The hanged are disgustingly good.
Banana sandwiches. So good.
Both of them, 100%. Where there's no world that I'm not going to put both of them in the case. They're 30 mil models. They're not very large. They take up no room. That's the deal. So we have a couple of the drowned as well. I just completely skipped over Jakuna Abume. There's no world that I'm not taking Miss Abume. She's very strong.
I think she's super good.
I think she's super, super good. And the drowned also, I think I haven't preferred because I think I like the idea of one drowned. I might take a second one in the optional, and I'm not going to bring a third one. I just don't see the point. I'm also not going to bring the Crooked Men. I love everything that the card does. They have a bunch of cool abilities. Shafted is such a cool premise, especially with the combination of Jakuna and Montresor, right? And they're like hard to put down. They're unaffected by severe and hazardous terrains, and they run all over the place. But they're movement 4, and they cost 7, and they don't really do damage. No. We're not doing that. And then Dead Outlaw, I'm sort of torn on. I think I want some combination of them in the box for sure, but I might honestly have it be the same sort of breakdown as the Drowned. I think 1, 2, 3. I think
Mhm.
that's probably what we're gonna do. I think that they're pretty strong and they can definitely do some cool
Yeah,
stuff. But
they enable some kind of cool combos with the crew,
yeah,
especially like combined with the guilty, which is kind of the guilty's whole shtick. But yeah,
yeah,
I think
and
it's definitely worth having one. I don't know that I would take
yeah.
two at any point, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I think definitely one. I mean, they they can get into position and still do the guilty shooting, right?
hmm
That's the whole thing because they have running guns.
yeah. I
So
don't think that I've ever seen a crooked man on the table ever.
I I have seen exactly
And they
6
have
crooked men
that's the
ever, and they are
crazy
the
thing.
3 I built for me and the 3
Yeah,
I built for Doug.
that's the crazy thing too. Like I look at them, and I mean they have a stat 6 on move earthquake that is blasts across everything and staggered. Like you'd think that would be great, but I think that they just get outclassed because so many other keyword models are so good, and like you can just crutch on having 2 hanged with
Yeah.
upgrades on them, and
Yeah,
it's
and you're like,
gnarly.
there's no world that they're gonna outcompete that,
No,
right?
no,
That's just not gonna happen.
yeah. I actually thought they had fewer wounds than they did. That surprised me a
Yeah,
little bit. I
they have
thought
a
they had
lot. They're
6.
really hard to kill.
Yeah.
They're hard to wound, and they have like 7 health.
hmm
I mean, they'd have to be, but like, I would like this model more if it had 2 less health and cost 2 less points.
hmm Yeah.
You know?
Yep. And I would say one thing that's kind of nice for Jackdaw as filling that kind of last slot in your bags if you're trying to go down to 6 keywords is like you don't need to have a ton of reps in with him. You basically just have to know how the turn 1 unpack is, and then as long as you're not going into a faction that's riddled with ruthless, like what do you call it, Thunders or Bayou, or theoretically a mirror match with Rezzers,
Yeah.
like you can just do the Jackdaw one double hanged with upgrades, smash somebody in the face with them, and you're probably going to have a pretty good game unless they really know how to deal with them. So
Yeah.
it's not a crew that you probably need a ton of experience with to make work. I think having something like that in your bags is definitely worthwhile.
For sure. Yeah, I think they're just very strong. And I think that they're really, really hard to deal with, and that is the most forgiving combination. Things that are very difficult
hmm
to die and are just very offensively quite strong.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. So we're just going to move on to versatiles out of keywords and then do some closing thoughts. So for versatile and out of keyword models, I only really have one strictly out of keyword model on the list at all, and that's going to be the Whiskey Golem. While I'm not going to be taking Brewmaster, there are enough situations that taking an out of keyword Whiskey Golem can just absolutely be crushing for your opponent to deal with. Especially if I happen to play like Ma 2 and I take Sparks in the crew. A Whiskey Golem out of keyword higher in that with his command construct and his ability to give it like shielded and stuff is just so good. So good. So
Yeah.
I have to consider that to be in. I don't, it doesn't really have any tech. So I wouldn't really put it as like a required out of keyword tech model. It's just a very good, very fast beater that fits very well with a couple of different crews. Aside from that, Lucky Effigy and Lucky Emissary I consider absolutely critical. The Effigy is very good in a couple of very specific crews, and then the rest of the time you probably just don't take it. But it doesn't take up much space, and for the crews that it does work with, it works very, very well. The Emissary is amazing. You can do basically the same thing with the Emissary that I just talked about with the Whiskey Golem. So, like, if I'm really pressed for space, then yeah, maybe I only take one of those because the Emissary is a construct and it can do all the construct things with those other models that I had already talked about. Ideally, I would like to take 2, especially because as the Emissary, I usually use the old Summer Avatar, which is not quite as tricky to transport as the Doom Wheel.
Gotta love Peaches.
Gotta love Peaches. So Bo Peep is easily one of the faction all-stars in my opinion. Now that she's been out for a while, people kind of know how to deal with her, but that doesn't change the fact that she helps out so many Bayou crews with the unpack, and then her aura is like super strong. So I think she always makes it in. Just as being a fast model with Reckless and Trample, like that's enough so that you can just use her to score points after, turn 1 or 2. Gluttony also super good against certain crews. He's one of only 2 models in the whole game with Maddening Drums, and that's literally all he does. Like there's nothing else good on his card. His Crossroads 7 aura doesn't really go off that often. Like maybe once in 10 games. you really take him for nothing but maddening drums, and that's enough for me to justify keeping him in my bags all the time. Bayou Gators I already talked about. Stumpy is terrible. I can't fathom any universe that I ever play Stumpy. She's very bad. McTavish I already talked about. If I'm not playing Zoraida 2, I'm never taking McTavish, so he stays home. I'm never taking Bayou Gremlins with me. Even at 2 points, they're terrible. Like, absolutely terrible models that don't do anything worthwhile. Especially if
Not
you're
even one for the
actually
trench
playing Big
coat?
Hat. Not even one for the trench coat.
Oh my
I guess that's okay. No, all right.
Like, you gotta keep one for the trench
You're
coat.
right.
The
You're
the
no, I
Bayou
hadn't
upgrade.
thought about that. So I actually have to put Bayou Gremlin 1 over here and Bayou Gremlins other over here. So there we go. And now I have to fix the margin on that spreadsheet cell. Thank you for reminding me, Brandon. I need one Bayou Gremlin.
It's not the most important I mean, like, oh no, I lose out on my Bayou Gremlin, but like, you know, you're paying for the upgrade. You might as well
take it. All right. So smugglers I already talked about. I do think it's worth having a smuggler in your bag for some weirdo matchups. I think that I actually put this smuggler in a different spot than I did up in Infamous. Yeah, I did. I am actually going to move the one smuggler over here just because there are a couple of specific matches that they are very good in. Not that you see a super lot of bandit these days, but like they are very good for picking up those scheme markers that your opponent's bandit models have dropped next to you. You can use them to move some markers up the table. And unfortunately, you can't do this because you're not playing Big Hat. But if I were playing Big Hat, they can do some real goofy stuff with the current versions of Lenny and White Rabbit Company. So we'll see if that actually still works after the errata. But basically, you can... well, it doesn't matter. I'll say it anyway because it's fun. So you can use the White Rabbit Company to put a fancy hat on Lenny to make him act as a scheme marker. Then you can have Lenny toss the smuggler 10 inches up the table who has drag behind and can drag Lenny up because he counts as a scheme marker to be in base contact. So he can toss him and the smuggler with 1 AP, which is kind of cute. Still a terrible keyword that I won't play, but there you go. Pork chop is something I would only play if I were playing Ma 2. I can't think of many situations that I would choose to play a pork chop otherwise. But if I really need a fast model with armor 2 that I don't think my opponent's going to be able to easily deal with, I might do it. Most of the time, I'm just going to take like an out of keyword, like, you know, anything, Iron Skeeter, Silurid, what have you. But it has enough play that if I'm playing Ma 2, I really want to have it in the bag. Bert, I already talked about. Gracie, I already talked about. Pigapole, I already talked about. Fluffernutter, I have in the No Way, No Hows because if I'm not playing Wong, I'm not taking Fluff. There's just no reason to. And Ruffles, I actually already talked about Ruffles. I am actually going to move them. Where did I put them? I put them in the optionals. So I'm going to put Ruffles into the optionals for the reasons that I already mentioned in the Trixie overview. So there we go. That's all my versatiles and out of keywords. Brandon.
Ooh,
do
yeah,
you think?
We get a couple.
We get a couple.
Firstly,
come to find out, Rezzers have good out of keyword and versatile models.
They have a couple, you know. There's a few. Starting off the batch with the one that I think is just probably the one that is maybe the one that I take the most. That's probably not even true, but we'll start with Sloth. So Sloth is really good. He's really hard to put in the ground, and more importantly, in certain keywords in Rezzers, you have a lot of undead models, which means Rigor Mortis gives them fast. The Valedictorian is one such model that is great with fast. Fasting your dudes is super, super good. His attack, honestly, isn't bad if he gets in melee because it slows the opponent, which is pretty good too. But you're never doing his Crossroads 7 stuff. I've never once had it happen. I don't think I ever will. Maybe once in 100 games you'll have it actually be relevant where somebody tries to heal and you're like, no. But
yeah, I think that's kind of how all the Crossroads auras work, except for
when you run them in the Crossroads groove.
Maybe Wrath. His goes off probably pretty often.
Yeah.
Maybe. Anyway.
Actually, hold on. a new challenger approaches. Maybe I run Rezzers the Crossroads 7 with Sloth as the master. I was the leader. Okay, we're not
New
doing
challenger approaches. Hey, that's a great way to do Scorpius, right?
that. Yeah.
Sure.
No,
Yeah.
it's
No,
not
it's not.
because then
Don't
you'd
do
have to
that.
play the Crossroads 7, and that crew can't win.
No.
So we have the Enslaved Spirits, which are oh, we have Manos. Manos not technically versatile. He is out of keyword, but Manos is a Chad. He has so many absurd things you can do with him.
Oh my god, he's so
Um,
nuts.
he's he's the best 10-point versatile model Rezzers have. So he is very hard to kill. He has regen 2. He's a henchman. He gets fast because he's assassin. He has Lantern of Souls, so he ignores demise. He has extended reach, so he can't get charged. He has siphon power, so he doesn't even have to stone, even though he could stone if he wanted to. So you can siphon power and stone if you want to double up for some reason. He doesn't have anything that's relevant to do that with. His 2-inch melee attack is quite good. It's it's not great damage, but it has some cool
He
triggers.
just keeps getting better.
Um,
It's so nuts.
he has leap, which he can take a damage to stone for a suitless to effectively for a suitless 5. Or if you want, you can have a 5 or better of rams or masks to make it happen and get a free attack. Or you can stone for 1, or you can stone for 1 and price progress for 1 for on a suitless 5 get a built-in leap with an attack.
Bonkers.
That's nuts, and none of that's even his best thing.
No.
His best thing is his Spirit Barrage, which pulses out unresistible stagger, which single-handedly wins games sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you're playing a wedge game and or a flank, mostly wedge, and your opponent takes Manos, like just don't do whatever you were gonna do with your unpack. Just spread all your dudes out, because if you try and do it, you're fucking baked. Like it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, you literally cannot place a single model within 2 inches of another model that you want to move, especially if it's a crew that does an unpack with movement shenanigans, right?
Yeah.
If that is your foundational premise, you will literally lose the game on the spot, because they will say, okay, first activation, Manos, walk, shoot, walk, leap, shoot.
Yeah, or in wedge,
stone for the divine strike,
walk, shoot, and then leap back behind cover.
Yeah, like. In wedge 17 inches you have to get it. It's 18 because he's moving 6. Of course he's moving 6. What was I thinking? Movement 5. Oh my gosh. Manos is the best model in Rezzers. Right. End of story. Always you buy this. I bought the. I don't even have any of Yanlo built. I built that one model. That's the only model.
Yeah, I can see that.
Oh boy,
bonkers!
What a guy.
Talking about more bonkers models.
Yeah, Enslaved Spirits are also ridiculous.
How many Rezzer crews do you play that you don't just automatically put one Enslaved Spirit into?
Castor. End of list. And quite frankly, that's probably wrong.
That's probably wrong. Yeah, they're just so good.
Yeah, so Enslaved Spirits are 3 points. They are sentient. They're significant. Like, oh my god, these guys. They're so good. They have Chain Gang, which lets you get movement shenanigans out. They die into a ski marker, and they can't attack or do damage otherwise. But who cares? For 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, just the dying into a scheme marker thing. And it's like one of the things that makes the Ulix crew good is the fact that they all have Demise Delicious Bacon, so they can drop a scheme marker instead of a corpse. And Enslaved Spirits can do it, but within a 3-inch aura, because why not?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
And you get them in the same box that you get the next model, the Gwisen.
The Gwisen.
Gwisen are they're okay. Probably honestly, this probably should say Gwisen 1 here, and then Gwisen 2 and 3 over here. Now that I think about it, but basically they are really important because their Rezzers take a hit model. There are crews where kidnapping or a character assassination or some stupid nonsense, or even let's say Manos, right, in a Rezzer duel match, right, take the hit's important. It's a thing that you should have access to in your toolbox. Strongly recommend it.
Yeah, and they're great because like they're just a model that just can work passively. You just put them in a place and they do their thing, and then they activate last. And if your opponent was trying to score like leave your mark or set the trap, they just casually trail of gore, pick up the marker, and get a free move or attack or whatever. Like there's nothing on their card that says they have to go early unless you need them to be in a specific spot. So yeah.
Very strange, very strange. But they're good. They're good guys. Oh, and also, if they decide to kill him on you, they have
Fucking
vengeance,
Vengeance
right?
2.
It
It's
now
so dumb.
super important note, does not work with take a hit.
No.
They have to both be the target and the one that is hit. So you can't
Right.
vengeance take a hit like people were doing for a while. They clarified that. But
Right.
if they're like, well, I really want to kill this take a hit model, then they're going to take a bunch of damage to do it. And they're incorporeal, right? They're great models. Really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Dead Rider. He's arguably, I think, probably the second best rider in the game. He does a lot of stuff that's really, really strong. I like. There's no world that he's hard to fit in because he's 11 points, but so is every rider. But his special ridery stuff. I mean, he's a min 3 2-inch melee beater that lets you kidnap people, which is insane. He has a crow trigger that lets you push models up to 2 inches for every crow in the final duel total on his melee attack that he can do multiple times per turn. And so, like, realistically, if you have probably a good number, like, you can very, very easily kidnap people, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, an absurd distance.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't push the model, it push this model up to 2 inches in any direction for every crow in its final duel total. So it's trivial to push the actual 50 mil base of the rider 4 inches, or even 4 inches, and then put the model behind it and then just do it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're talking about 250 mils, 8 inches. If you spend 2 of the things and have 2 crows, it's nuts. It's a nuts kidnap. He's really, really strong. Ride with me is a really, really strong ability.
And like even after the errata, so that you don't just get to like place models all the way on the other side of him. Like, you know, you do have to have a push lane to get the model into base contact, but it's still not that hard. And his revel is, I mean, all the revels are good. His is very, very, very good. Yeah. It's not like Pale Rider good, but I mean, what is
no?
Really?
But what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
It pulses out injured, which is very strong. It can summon a bunch of zombies. That's, there's so many things.
Mm-hmm.
We've already sort of talked about the Gravediggers. This is just exactly the same from Inreva. I'm taking one for sure. I probably won't take the second one, unless there's absolutely space. Grave Golem we've already talked about as well. I'm likely going to take it because it can do some shenanigans with Reva.
Yep.
And Seamus even. There's it's generally not an awful model. It's good in circumstances. I'm not a big fan of the Emissary or Effigy. I think I'm likely probably going to include them just because I have painted mine like Big Bird and have attached googly eyes to it. And that's fun to show people. But that's more of a motivation than actually wanting to play it.
Yeah.
I think there's not a lot of crews that really care so much that I'm bringing. There might be other cases where he's really good, but the aura is okay. But
realistically, like, probably the worst Emissary. In all honesty.
I mean, I don't know about that, but he doesn't do a lot.
Doesn't do a lot. Yeah.
Mindless zombies, you just have to bring these as rezzers. I'm bringing 3 for sure. If I can fit the other 2, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Mortimer, sure, Rotten, and Bone Piles. I'm not bringing those.
No. Yeah, they're all terrible.
They're all bad.
Yep.
Don't do it.
The only one of them that I've ever seen get any work done is like a singular Bone Pile, and it's still, I mean, I don't know. I still don't think they're really worth it. And that's really saying a lot because they're a 6 stone, 8 wound model with hard to wound and numbskull, and they do a bunch of healing, and they still, I don't really think, make the cut. I didn't even know they had Ruthless. They have Ruthless?
Oh, are they Ruthless? That's
are.
Wild.
That's hilarious.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think any of them ever make it in. I don't know. Yeah. Reser players tell us we're wrong, but I think they're very bad.
They can't. They literally can't say that.
They literally can't. So that is everything. We made it. 2 hours, 33 minutes, which is pretty much right where I thought we were going to be. So I hope that people enjoy the video aspect of this episode. I know it's not like a super engaging one, but my hope is that being able to see the list laid out is going to make it a little bit easier for folks to really frame the conversation that Brandon and I are having. Plus, as a bonus, it gave me and Brandon handy lists that we could print out to make sure that we actually had all the required models painted and packed in our bags. So bonus. Whether or not I actually plan on doing Scorpius at Nova, I cannot say. A lot of that's going to depend on how much stuff I can get painted. The storage space isn't really going to be so much of an issue because of the train, like we talked about. But if I do Scorpius, this is kind of the theme that I'm going to be following. And yeah, really, really looking forward to going. Before we close it out, Brandon, did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for prepping for tournaments, right? I know that people have their local stuff, and those are you can just sort of throw some models in the car and head out. Maybe play a game or two with the pools, know what you're doing. For the bigger stuff, I've always found that I get much more of a bang for my buck when I really sort of take a look at the pools, plan out what models I'd like to bring. And especially in a situation where it's not just like a Captain Con thing for us, where it's like a drive and like worst case scenario, an hour away, I could go home and pick something up if I forget it. We'll be in Virginia or DC or wherever. That we just can't. It's just not an option. There's no way that we can retrieve the models. It's just not viable. And so if you don't bring something that you want and you figure out you later do, it's not going to be as fun, and the whole point of this is that it's a little vacation. We do play a whole bunch of Malifaux, hang out with some of our friends that we haven't seen in a while, and doing all of the legwork ahead of time to make sure that you know what you need to bring. You sort of have an idea about the scheme pools. Not only helps with the packing and prep, but it also helps with your game times, right? If you're not having to think as hard about what models you need to bring and what models you need to plan and what you're doing, you're just gonna have a more fun game that you're gonna get to faster and be able to play.
Yeah, I mean, if you bring your entire faction to a tournament and you're not trying to Scorpius, then you can get a little bit of analysis paralysis. You roll up to a round and you're like, I have 7 masters or whatever to choose from. How do I do this round? And invariably what happens is, you get to round 3 and you make some whack ass stupid decision about a master hire and screw yourself because you overthought the situation. Or you end up bringing a whole faction, but then you just solo a single master the whole time, which happens to be kind of a lot. So I think that doing the kind of exercise that we just did, maybe in a shorter format, would be very valuable for players of every skill level, to be perfectly honest. Because let's say you are deciding that you only want to take 3 masters or 2 masters because you just don't have that much space. You can kind of use this same exercise, but then take it a step further and start saying, I can play this master into these 2 rounds. I can play this master into these 3 rounds. And I think that that's probably all that I need. As long as they're covering each other's weaknesses, then, you should probably be okay. So I would encourage everybody to do this sort of thing, especially if they have an entire faction to choose from and they're not going to do something stupid like solo Ivan the whole time, like I was talking about. Yeah. So check out the Danger Planet channel. Brandon is one of the founders and a regular contributor. I happen to pop on pretty often as well. And if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to watch one of the most recent episodes, which are recorded with Doug and Sam, actually doing tournament prep, talking about what happens when you're attending your first tournament and how you make your hiring decision. So it kind of dovetails in nicely with this particular episode. Brandon, I think we actually managed to do it. We didn't make any mistakes. I don't think I have to edit anything, which means I don't have to learn a new skill just yet, which is very exciting.
Well, there's always next time.
There's always next time. So with all that said, keep your conversations boring and stay weird, folks. Brandon, we still didn't make any mistakes.
Wild. Well, wasn't there that hour and a half where I was just shouting continuously and had blacked out? Or did that not happen this time?
I am going to have to edit this whole thing.
Yeah, you're going to have to edit it out.
All right.